Hey there, if you found your way here tonight, maybe it's because you're looking for something soft, something peaceful, something warm to fall asleep to. And maybe, just maybe, you love animals like I do, especially the quiet, mysterious little souls with whiskers and silent steps. Tonight, I want to tell you a story, a gentle one, about a kitten, a tiny, shivering little thing who waited by a window night after night, hoping for something. Not quite knowing what. She didn't have a name, not yet. Just soft fur, curious eyes, and a heart that refused to give up. If you've ever rescued a pet or been rescued by one, if you've ever looked into the eyes of a cat and felt like they understood something you didn't say out loud, then I think this story is going to feel a little like home. So, pull up your blanket, rest your head, let the rain tap softly on the window while I tell you all about. You know that feeling when you're outside in the rain, looking through a window at somewhere warm, somewhere dry? That's where our story begins, with a tiny gray kitten, no bigger than your hand, pressing her nose against cold glass on the loneliest street in town. And friend, she wasn't looking out. She was looking in. The rain started like it always did in this part of the city, sudden and with a sigh. 1 minute the sidewalk was just kind of damp. The next, pouring, big. That drop splattering the pavement like someone turned a faucet on full blast overhead. Underneath Mrs. Gable's rusty flower cart, a little ball of gray fur shivered. She was just a kitten, really, all big eyes and ribs you could almost count. Didn't have a name, didn't have a home. Just this damp cardboard box she'd found behind the bakery, and now this wobbly cart. She tucked her nose deeper into her own thin tail. It didn't help much. The wind was picking up now, blowing rain sideways under the cart. It hit her ears, cold and sharp. Plink, plink, plink. Across the narrow street, warm yellow light spilled from a row of houses. Windows glowed. She'd been watching one in particular, the one with the blue door. A boy lived there. She'd seen him before. He had kind eyes, and sometimes, he left a little bowl of something near the steps when it rained. Not today, though. Today, the rain came too fast. The kitten lifted her head. Raindrops caught in her whiskers. Her ears, one had a tiny nick at the tip, pricked forward. Listening, beyond the drumming rain and the distant grumble of a truck, she heard something else. Laughter. Coming from inside that house with the blue door. A warm, muffled sound that made her tiny chest ache. She scooted as far back under the cart as she could, pressing her wet side against the cold brick wall of the building behind her. Water trickled down the gutter nearby, a sad little river heading nowhere good. The kitten closed her eyes. Just for a second. Just to pretend the brick wasn't so cold. Just to pretend the laughter was closer. Later, much later, the rain slowed to a drizzle. The kitten stretched stiff legs. Everything ached. The street was quiet now, slick and shiny under the few working streetlights. Mist was rising from the wet pavement, curling around dumpsters and parked cars like ghostly fingers. Hunger pinched her belly, sharp and familiar. Time to move. She slipped out from under the cart, her tiny paws silent on the wet sidewalk. The mist swallowed her up almost immediately. She felt invisible. Small. Just another shadow in the gray. She kept low, skirting the edge of the buildings, staying away from the open street. Her nose worked overtime. Damp concrete, stale grease from the diner's vent, the sharp tang of wet garbage, and then something else. Something faint but wonderful. Fish. Hope, thin but bright, flickered inside her. She followed the smell, quickening her pace. It led her down the narrow alley beside the blue door house. The smell was stronger here. Definitely fish. Leftovers, maybe? In a trash can? She padded closer, ears swiveling, listening for danger. Halfway down the alley, she froze. A sound. Not the wind. Not the dripping drain pipe. Footsteps. Light, quick footsteps coming from the street end of the alley. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Run. Hide. Every instinct screamed it. But the smell of fish held her, just for a desperate second. And that second was too long. The footsteps stopped at the alley entrance. The kitten pressed herself flat against the cold, wet bricks, trying to melt into the wall. She couldn't see who it was through the thick fog, just a dark shape standing there, watching. Panic surged. She darted sideways, looking for a crack, a hole, anything. Her paws slipped on the wet pavement. She stumbled, letting out a tiny, terrified mew before she could stop it. The shape moved, not towards her, but slowly, carefully. It walked along the sidewalk, past the alley entrance, towards the front of the blue door house. The kitten stayed frozen, trembling, her eyes huge in the gloom. The shape stopped right in front of the big window she'd been watching earlier. It was the boy. She recognized the slope of his shoulders, the way he pushed his hair out of his eyes. He stood on the sidewalk, looking not into the alley, but up at the brightly lit window of his own house. He lifted a hand, knocked softly on the glass. Top, top, top. Inside, a woman's silhouette appeared. His mom, probably. She waved, smiling. The boy waved back. Then he turned and looked straight down the alley. The kitten held her breath. Could he see her? She was just a gray smudge in the gray mist. He didn't come closer. He just stood there for a long moment, looking into the alley, where she hid. Then he shoved his hands into his pockets, hunched his shoulders against the drizzle, and walked up the steps to the blue door. It opened, spilling warm light and the smell of something like cookies onto the wet porch. Then it closed, swallowing him up. The alley was dark again. Quiet. Just the drip, drip, drip of water and the frantic beating of one tiny, lonely heart. The kitten crept forward, towards the spot where the boy had stood. Near the steps, half hidden by a soggy bush, sat a small white bowl. Steam rose faintly from it into the cool night air. He had left something. Tonight. Just for her. She crept closer, the smell of plain, warm chicken filling her senses. Her fear was still there, buzzing under her fur, but something else pushed her forward. Something stronger than the rain, the cold, or the fog. Hunger, and maybe, just maybe, the tiniest flicker of something new. Something she didn't have a name for yet. Ever felt invisible? Like the world just rushes past while you're standing still? That was this little gray kitten's whole world. No name, no home, just cold nights under an old flower cart, watching warm lives flicker behind windows. But tonight, something small changed. And friend, sometimes that's all it takes. The chicken in the little white bowl wasn't fancy. Just boiled, plain, torn into tiny shreds. But to the kitten, it smelled like heaven, like safety, like the ghost of something she barely remembered, warmth, and being full, and not hurting deep inside her belly. She crept closer, belly low to the wet pavement. Every muscle trembled. The alley was dark, the mist curling like cold smoke around her legs. The light from the Blue Door house's windows felt far away now, blocked by the corner of the building. Just her, the bowl, and the steady drip, drip, drip from the overflowing gutter above. Could it be a trap? The thought skittered through her fear-numbed mind. Big hands grabbing. A cage. The terrifying roar of the animal control truck she'd hidden from last week. She froze, one paw hovering just inches from the first step leading up to the porch, where the bowl sat nestled by the soggy azalea bush. A low rumble echoed down the street. A garbage truck, maybe, blocks away. She flinched, nearly bolting back into the shadows. But the smell, oh, the smell. It wrapped around her, insistent, promising. Her empty stomach cramped painfully, overriding the fear. Just a quick bite. Just one. She darted forward, faster than thought, snatched a single piece of chicken in her mouth, and scrambled backwards, so fast her back paws slid on the wet concrete. Heart pounding like a tiny drum against her ribs, she crouched in the deepest shadow, chewing frantically. The flavor exploded, warm, savory, unlike the sour scraps or crunchy bugs she usually found. It was good, really good. She swallowed, licking her lips. Nothing happened. No shouts, no grabbing hands, no slamming doors. Just the quiet alley, the rain easing to a drizzle, and the bowl still sitting there, steaming gently in the cool air. Okay, maybe. She crept forward again, slower this time. Closer to the steps. closer to the bowl. She kept her eyes darting everywhere. The dark windows of the house, the mouth of the alley, the street beyond. But it stayed quiet, safe. This time, she didn't run after grabbing a piece. She stayed right by the steps, hunched protectively over the shred of chicken she'd taken, eating it where she stood. Then another piece, and another. Each bite eased the sharp ache in her belly a little more. The warmth spread from her stomach outward, a tiny, unfamiliar comfort against the damp chill clinging to her fur. She finished the piece she was working on and dared to look directly at the bowl. Still half full. She took one hesitant step up onto the bottom stair, then another. The wooden step felt rough and cold under her paws, but solid. She reached the bowl. For a long moment, she just stood there, breathing in the scent, listening. The only sound was the soft patter of leftover raindrops falling from the leaves above onto the porch roof, and her own quiet purr, a sound she hadn't made in so long it startled her, vibrating faintly in her chest. Slowly, carefully, she lowered her head and ate properly, right from the bowl. The ceramic was smooth under her chin, cool. The chicken was slightly warm still, soft and easy to chew. She ate until the bowl was clean, licking every last tiny fragment from the smooth surface. The feeling of being full was almost overwhelming. Heavy, sleepy. Her eyes felt heavy. She backed down the steps, her movements slower now, less frantic. The alley still felt dark, but less threatening. The cart she slept under was a little way down the street. She looked at the blue door. Closed. Quiet. Then she looked at the empty bowl. A tiny, hesitant flicker of something warm stirred in her chest, right next to the purr that hadn't quite stopped. Instead of darting straight back to the dubious shelter of the wobbly cart, she found a slightly drier patch of pavement beneath the overhang of the bakery's back stoop, closer to the blue door house than she'd ever dared sleep before. It wasn't much, just a shallow alcove by a rusty drain pipe, but it was out of the worst of the drizzle. She circled twice, kneaded the cold concrete with her claws for a moment, a leftover instinct, searching for softness that wasn't there, then curled into a tight, damp ball, tucking her nose under her tail. The purr rumbled softly again, a quiet counterpoint to the dripping gutter. For the first time in weeks, she fell asleep without the sharp bite of hunger keeping her awake. Her dreams were vague, formless things, tinged with warmth and the lingering taste of chicken. She didn't dream of grabbing hands or roaring trucks. She just slept. The cold woke her, not the sharp, shocking cold of rain, but the deep, creeping chill of pre-dawn. The mist had thickened into a heavy fog, swallowing the streetlights into glowing halos. Everything was muffled, silent, and damp. Her fur felt clumped and cold. The warmth from the chicken was long gone. She stretched stiffly, joints popping, a tiny yawn cracking her jaw. Her first thought wasn't hunger. The memory of being full was still surprisingly vivid, but the bone-deep chill. She needed to get back under the cart before the bakery workers arrived with their loud voices and slamming doors. She slipped from her alcove, a gray wraith in the gray fog, padding silently down the familiar sidewalk. Reaching the cart, she ducked underneath. The familiar smells of damp wood, old dirt, and something vaguely floral, left over from Mrs. Gable's long-gone blooms, greeted her. It wasn't warm, but it was shelter. Out of the wind, out of the worst wet. She found her usual spot against the slightly drier back brick wall and curled up again, trying to conserve heat. As she tucked her nose into her chest, seeking any warmth, the rough texture of her own fur against her nose triggered a sudden, sharp memory. It wasn't a thought, exactly. More like a feeling, a scent, a sound, softness. Not the scratchy dampness of her current fur, but an incredible, enveloping softness. Fluffier, warmer, and a smell. Warm milk, clean fur, and something uniquely comforting, like sun on dry grass. Mother. The memory washed over her, vivid and painful. A small, dark space. Not cold. Warm. So warm. Pressed close to warm, wiggling bodies, her littermates. The soft rumble of her mother's purr vibrating through her tiny body, a soothing earthquake. The feeling of being completely safe, completely protected. The gentle rasp of her mother's tongue washing her face, her ears, rough but loving. The softness of her mother's belly fur as she nuzzled into nurse, the warm milk filling her tiny stomach instantly, effortlessly. She remembered the feeling of being carried, gently held in her mother's mouth, the world swaying dizzyingly below. She remembered the low, warning growl her mother made when something unfamiliar approached their safe corner behind the old shed. She remembered the comforting bulk of her mother curled around them all as they slept. Then the sharp, confusing wrongness. Loud noises, shouting, banging. The terrifying sense of her mother's fear flooding the small space. Being roughly scooped up, separated from the warm bodies and the comforting rumble. Cold air, bright, terrifying light. A hard, jolting ride in something dark and roaring. Then nothing. Just cold pavement, terrifying noises, and overwhelming, gnawing hunger. Alone. A tiny, mournful sound escaped her. Not quite a mew, not quite a whimper. She buried her nose deeper into her own chest fur, but it only felt scratchy and damp, a poor imitation of that lost softness. The memory of warmth made the present cold feel even deeper, more desolate. The purr that had rumbled in her sleep last night was gone, replaced by a hollow ache. She thought of the boys' bowl, the unexpected warmth, the relief of the food. It wasn't the deep, all-encompassing safety of her mother's presence, but it was something. A tiny point of light in the gray fog of her existence. A flicker of not alone. The fog outside the cart began to glow faintly pink as dawn approached. The city started its slow, groaning wake-up. Distant car doors slammed. An engine coughed to life. The bakery delivery truck rumbled down the street, its brakes hissing. The kitten tensed, pressing herself flatter against the brick. She thought of the blue door, the boy's quiet presence last night. The gentle tap-tap-tap on the window, not a threat, just communication. She thought of the food appearing, like magic, right when the rain came. Was that care? Was it possible? The memory of her mother's fierce protection warred with the bone-deep fear of humans instilled by her abandonment and life on the streets. Humans meant noise, chaos, grabbing hands, the terrifying roar of the truck. But this boy, he was different, quieter. His eyes, when she'd glimpsed them before darting away, hadn't held the sharp impatience or indifference she usually saw. They'd seemed kind, like the eyes she saw sometimes in the reflections of the warm windows she watched. A truck backfired loudly down the block. She flinched violently, the fragile thread of trust snapping instantly. Fear flooded back, cold and familiar. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing herself invisible. This was her world. Cold, fearful, alone. The memory of her mother's fur faded like the fog under the rising sun, leaving only the damp chill beneath the cart. As the days blurred into a damp, chilly week, a fragile routine began to form around the Blue Door house. The kitten stayed hidden during the noisy daylight hours, retreating to the deepest shadows under the cart or finding temporary refuge in the alley behind overflowing dumpsters. But as the late afternoon light began to fade, painting the wet streets in shades of gray and orange, she would drift closer. She learned the boy's schedule. He'd burst out the Blue Door most afternoons, often carrying a lumpy backpack, sometimes with other loud, laughing kids, sometimes alone. She'd watch from her hiding spot near the bakery stoop or deep within the alley's gloom. He'd kick a stone down the sidewalk, or stop to pet a friendly dog being walked by a neighbor, his voice carrying snippets of conversation. Homework sucks, or did you see that goal? He never looked for her directly during these times. He'd walk up the steps, disappear inside, and the Blue Door would close. The kitten would wait, patient and silent. Then, as dusk settled properly and the streetlights buzzed to life, the magic often happened. Sometimes it was the boy himself. He'd open the door quietly, step out onto the porch, look carefully around, his gaze often sweeping near her hiding spots without lingering, and place a small bowl down near the steps, sometimes just inside the alley entrance. Leftovers. Bits of tuna fish one night, Plain rice mixed with little chunks of unseasoned hamburger another. A small pile of dry, crunchy food that smelled vaguely like chicken. He'd retreat back inside quickly, leaving the offering. Other times, it was the woman, his mother. She'd come out, maybe to bring in a package or check the mailbox. She'd pause, look thoughtfully at the spot near the steps, and sometimes go back inside, returning with a small dish or a little pile of food. Her movements were calmer, less hurried than the boys. She'd glance around too, but her eyes held a softer kind of watchfulness. The kitten learned to wait. Wait until the door had been closed for several minutes. Wait until no lights flickered near the windows overlooking the spot. Then, and only then, would she emerge, a silent gray ghost, and creep towards the gift. The fear was always there, a constant hum under her fur, but the gnawing hunger and the memory of that first warm chicken were stronger. She ate quickly, efficiently, always alert, always ready to vanish. After eating, she often didn't retreat far. She'd find a shadowed corner across the street, maybe tucked beside a parked car or behind a thick hedge in the neighbor's yard. Curled up as small as possible, she'd watch the Blue Door house. It became her nightly ritual, her strange comfort. The windows glowed golden. She could see shapes moving inside. The boy, sitting at a table, his head bent over something. The woman moving in what must be the kitchen. Sometimes, an older man with glasses reading in a chair. She couldn't hear much, just muffled sounds of conversation, the clink of dishes, sometimes the faint sound of music or a television laugh track. She watched the routines. The way the kitchen light was brightest just after sunset. How the light in the room upstairs, the boys' room, stayed on later than the others. The way the living room lamp cast a warm pool of light onto the porch. She saw them eating together around a table. Saw the boy gesturing excitedly about something. Saw the woman ruffle his hair. Saw them laugh. She saw the warmth. Not just the physical warmth radiating faintly from the windows onto the chilly night air, but the warmth of connection, of belonging. It seeped into her watching place, a tangible thing she could almost feel, like the ghost of sunlight on stone. It made the empty space under the cart feel colder, wider. One night, after finishing the last crunchy bit of kibble left near the alley, she crossed the street silently and settled into her observation spot behind Mrs. Gable's overgrown rhododendron bush, directly opposite the Blue Door house. The fog was light tonight, just a haze blurring the edges of the streetlights. The living room curtains were open. Inside, the family was gathered. The man was in his chair reading. The woman was knitting something long and blue. The boy was sprawled on the floor, fiddling with some colorful plastic pieces. As the kitten watched, the boy looked up, said something with a grin. The woman laughed, a sound that carried faintly through the glass. She put down her knitting, got up and walked over. She ruffled his hair again, then bent down, pointing at something he was building. They talked for a moment, heads close together. The man looked up from his book, smiling at them. The kitten watched, utterly still. Her own tiny chest felt tight, not with fear this time, but with a longing so deep and sharp it stole her breath. It wasn't just the warmth or the food she craved in that moment. It was the easy touch, the shared laughter, the feeling of being part of a circle of light in the darkness. The feeling of being seen, not as a stray to be shooed away, but as someone whose presence mattered. A car drove past, its headlights sweeping over the bush. She ducked lower, pressing herself into the damp earth. When the lights passed, she looked back. The scene inside was unchanged, comfortable, secure, whole. She looked down at her own small paws, dirty from the street, her fur still damp in patches. She looked at the empty alley behind her, the dark shape of her cart shelter. She looked back at the glowing window. The boy was showing his mother his finished creation now, holding it up proudly. A tiny sound escaped her, barely a whisper on the night air. It wasn't a purr. It wasn't a mew. It was a sigh. A sigh filled with the ache of watching something beautiful and unreachable, like a firefly in a jar you couldn't open. She didn't have a name. She didn't have a home. She had cold nights, scavenged meals, and fear. But she also had this The nightly ritual, the small bowl of hope, and the silent vigil at the window of warmth. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. But for now, it was all she had. She tucked her nose under her tail, her eyes never leaving the golden rectangle of light across the street, watching the lives flicker within, dreaming dreams she couldn't quite name. You ever lock eyes with someone and just know? Not in a big, dramatic way, but in that quiet second when the whole noisy world fades out, and it's just you and them and this tiny thread of something real. That's what happened on a Tuesday, around 4:37 p.m., when a boy named Leo finally saw the kitten who'd been watching his window all along. Leo shoved his math book deeper into his backpack, the zipper groaning in protest. School had dragged like cold syrup. All he wanted was a snack, maybe 20 minutes of pixel pause on his tablet, and 0 quadratic equations. He pushed open the blue door, the familiar creak echoing down the quiet street. Rain had threatened all afternoon but hadn't quite fallen. The air felt thick and damp, smelling like wet pavement, and the lilacs blooming in Mrs. Gable's yard across the street. He took the porch steps 2 at a time, sneakers thudding softly. That's when he saw it. Movement, quick and low, near the overgrown rhododendron bush hugging Mrs. Gable's fence. Just a blur of gray. A squirrel? Too small. A rat? His stomach did a little flip. He hated rats. He paused, backpack dangling from one shoulder, squinting into the deep green shadows under the bush. Nothing. Probably just the wind rustling leaves. He turned to go inside. There. Not wind. Eyes. Huge, round, and the color of dusty bottle glass. They stared back at him from the gloom beneath the bush, wide and utterly still. Leo froze. Not a rat. Definitely not. It was a cat. A kitten. So small it could probably fit inside his lunchbox. Its fur wasn't just gray. It was a messy patchwork of damp charcoal and ash, clumped in places, sticking out wildly in others. It looked less like an animal and more like a sad little dust bunny blown under the bush by the wind. Their eyes held. Leo didn't breathe. The kitten didn't blink. It was pressed so flat against the damp earth beneath the bush that it seemed to be trying to melt into it. He saw the faintest tremor running through its tiny body. Not from cold, he guessed. From fear. Pure, liquid fear. He knew this kitten. Or rather, he knew of it. The little shadow Mom mentioned seeing near the trash cans. The reason she'd started putting out the small blue bowl by the steps some nights. Just scraps, Leo, she'd said. Poor little, Mite looks half-starved. He'd seen the bowl emptied mornings, but he'd never actually seen her. Seeing her now, it was different. Up close, she wasn't just a stray. She was real. He saw the dried mud on her white-tipped paws, the way one ear had a tiny, jagged nick at the tip, the ribs pressing faintly against her messy fur. She wasn't hiding in the bush. She was hiding from him. He remembered the time last year he'd tried to rescue a lost tabby behind the grocery store. He'd moved too fast, too eager. The cat had bolted like a shot, vanishing into traffic. His dad had found him crying on the curb. Wild things need patience, but, he'd said softly, more than you think. Leo took a slow, silent breath. He didn't smile, didn't whisper, "Here, kitty," didn't move an inch closer. He just looked, let her see him looking. His backpack strap slid off his shoulder, landing with a soft thump on the porch boards. The kitten flinched violently at the sound, a tiny gasp of air escaping her. Her eyes widened impossibly further, whites showing all around the green. She was coiled tight, ready to explode out from under the bush in a blur of panic. Don't run. Please don't run. The thought was a silent scream in Leo's head. He forced his own tense shoulders to relax. Slowly, deliberately, he sank down onto the top porch step, not facing her directly, but angled slightly away, looking out towards the quiet street instead. He rested his elbows on his knees, letting his hands dangle loosely between them. Small. Non triatening. He counted the heartbeats pounding in his own ears. 1, 2, 3. The kitten didn't bolt. She stayed frozen, those enormous eyes fixed on him like he was a bomb about to go off. Leo stayed perfectly still. He watched a sparrow hop along Mrs. Gable's fence. He listened to the distant hum of a lawnmower a few streets over. He felt the damp wood of the step beneath his jeans. Minutes ticked by. The world felt strangely quiet, narrowed down to this patch of sidewalk, this porch, this bush, and the terrified creature hiding beneath it. Leo didn't dare look directly at her again. He kept his gaze soft, unfocused, looking at the pavement near the bush, but not at her. Slowly, infinitesimally slowly, he saw the rigid line of her spine soften, just a fraction. The tremor running through her seemed to lessen, not stop, but lessen. She wasn't pressed quite so flat anymore. She was watching, still scared, but watching. A car turned the corner, its engine a low growl. Instantly, the kitten shrank back, vanishing deeper into the shadows under the rhododendron. Leo stayed put, a still point in the sudden noise. The car passed. The quiet returned. He waited, counted 10 more slow breaths. Then, moving as if underwater, he pushed himself up from the step. He didn't look towards the bush. He just turned, opened the blue door as quietly as he could, and slipped inside. He closed the door softly behind him, leaning his forehead against the cool wood. His heart was still thumping. He could still see those huge, frightened green eyes.
Lau?
That you? Mom called from the kitchen.
Yeah.
His voice sounded rough. He cleared his throat. Just me. He walked towards the kitchen. The image of the tiny gray kitten burned onto the backs of his eyelids. Not a shadow, not just a stray. A pair of gentle eyes, full of a fear he couldn't even imagine, had finally seen him back. And for the first time, she hadn't run. The little blue bowl felt heavy in Leo's hands. Not because of the leftover tuna salad Mom had scooped into it, just a little mixed with plain rice to make it stretch, but because of the weight of the watching eyes he knew were out there. Somewhere. He stood inside the front door, peering through the narrow window beside it. The street was washed in the long, golden light of late afternoon. Shadows stretched across the pavement like dark fingers. He scanned the usual spots: the bakery stoop, the alley entrance, the deep shade under Mrs. Gable's rhododendron bush. Nothing moved. He'd been doing this for 3 days since the eye contact incident. That's how he thought of it. Each afternoon, after homework, he'd take the bowl out. But now, instead of just plunking it down and rushing back in, he'd try the step thing. Taking a deep breath, he turned the knob slowly, easing the door open just enough to slip through. The hinges gave their usual soft groan. He froze, listening. Only the sparrows chirping in the lilac bush. Good. He walked deliberately to the top step. He didn't look around wildly. He kept his movements smooth, unhurried. He bent down and placed the blue bowl carefully on the second step from the bottom, just inside the alley entrance where it was slightly sheltered. The smell of tuna and rice drifted up. Then came the hard part.
He sat down.
Right on the top step, just like before. He pulled his knees up, rested his arms on them, and looked out at the street, not down the alley or towards the bush. He tried to make himself look boring, uninteresting, like a piece of porch furniture. Please be there. Please don't run. He counted the cracks in the sidewalk across the street. 1, 2, 3 long ones radiating from the old oak tree's root bulge. He listened to the rhythmic chirp-chirp of a cardinal high up in the oak. He felt the warm wood of the step through his jeans, the cool breeze stirring the hair on the back of his neck. He tried to breathe slowly, evenly the way Dad did when he was meditating. In 2, 3, out 2, 3. Nothing happened. Minutes crawled by. A bumblebee buzzed lazily around the pot of geraniums Mom kept by the door. Disappointment, cold and heavy, started to settle in his stomach. Maybe she wasn't there. Maybe she'd moved on. Maybe yesterday was just a fluke. He was about to give up, his legs starting to cramp, when he heard it. Not a sound exactly, more like a shift in the air. A tiny, almost imperceptible rustle from the alley entrance, just beyond where he'd placed the bowl. He didn't turn his head, didn't even flick his eyes. He kept staring at the sidewalk cracks, but every nerve in his body was suddenly laser-focused on that spot just beyond his peripheral vision. His breath caught. Rustle, scrape. Silence. Scritch, like the tiniest claw on concrete. Leo held perfectly still. He could feel his heartbeat in his fingertips. Then, slowly, achingly slowly, a small gray shape materialized at the very edge of the alley shadows. It was her. She was crouched so low her belly fur brushed the concrete. Her eyes, enormous and luminous in the dimness, were fixed on him, not on the bowl, on him. She didn't move closer to the food. She stayed frozen at the alley's edge, a statue of fur and fear. Leo stayed frozen too, a statue of a boy trying desperately not to scare a ghost. The standoff felt like it lasted hours. The cardinal kept chirping. The bumblebee buzzed. Leo's foot started to tingle. He wanted to wiggle his toes so badly, but he didn't dare. He focused on the feeling of the breeze, the warmth of the sun on his arms, the faint, briny smell of the tuna. Look at the food, he thought, pouring every ounce of calm he could muster towards her. It's good. It's yours. I'm just air. Just porch furniture. As if she'd heard him, her gaze flickered, just for a nanosecond, down towards the blue bowl on the step, then snapped back to him. Another endless minute passed. Then, with a suddenness that made Leo's own heart jump, she darted forward. Not towards the bowl, just a single, lightning-fast step out of the alley shadows, onto the slightly brighter pavement near the steps. She froze again, closer now, trembling violently. Her eyes never left him. Leo didn't move, didn't blink. He just breathed. In 2, 3, out, 2, 3. Another dart, another frozen pause, even closer to the steps. He could see the individual clumps in her damp fur now, the way her whiskers quivered. She was eyeing the bowl. It was only inches from her nose now. The smell must be overwhelming. Hunger warred with terror on her tiny face. Leo saw her throat work as she swallowed. One more microdart. Her front paws were now on the bottom step. Her nose twitched, stretching towards the bowl's rim. This is it, Leo thought, his muscles screaming to stay relaxed.
She's gonna eat.
Just stay still.
Be wood. Be stone.
Her head dipped. Quick as a snake strike, she snatched a single, tiny shred of tuna from the very edge of the rice. She didn't even chew. She just gulped it down and scrambled backwards so fast she blurred, retreating several feet back towards the alley, crouching low. Leo hadn't moved. He kept his gaze soft, unfocused, looking at the space just above the bowl now. She watched him. He could almost see the calculations happening behind those green eyes. He didn't move. He didn't grab. The food was good. Slowly, cautiously, she crept forward again, not darting this time. A slow, deliberate stalk, belly low, every muscle tense. She reached the bottom step, stretched her neck, snatched another piece of tuna. This time, she chewed quickly, still watching him, poised for flight. He stayed still. She took another piece, and another. Each time, she retreated a little less. Each time, her body stayed slightly less rigid. Finally, she didn't retreat at all. She stayed on the bottom step, hunched over the bowl, eating rapidly. Her eyes still flickered up to him constantly, but the frantic terror was fading, replaced by a wary watchfulness. The trembling had almost stopped. Leo watched her eat. He saw the way her tiny jaw worked, the way her ears swiveled constantly listening, the way her dirty little paws braced against the rough wood of the step. She was so small, so incredibly vulnerable. A fierce, protective feeling surged in his chest, warm and unexpected. He didn't reach out, didn't speak. He just sat there, a quiet boy on a warm porch step, watching a lost kitten eat the tuna salad he'd brought her. The sun dipped lower, painting the street in gold and long shadows. The cardinal stopped singing. The world felt soft and quiet and strangely perfect. She cleaned the bowl, every last grain of rice, every fleck of tuna. She licked the smooth ceramic surface meticulously. Then, finally, she looked up at him. Not with fear this time, not quite with trust, but with something else. A flicker of assessment. A question. Leo held her gaze for a single, breathless second. Then, very slowly, deliberately, he gave her the tiniest nod. Just a dip of his chin. It's okay. She blinked. Once. Slowly. Then, without a sound, she melted back into the alley's shadows and was gone. Leo sat there for a long time after, the empty blue bowl beside him, the warmth of the setting sun on his back, and a new, fragile feeling blooming in his heart.
Then,
Not the pounding kind, but the steady, whispering kind that turned the world into a soft, gray watercolor. Leo stood at the front window, watching droplets chase each other down the glass. Perfect bowl weather. He'd chosen tonight's offering carefully. The last bits of plain, boiled chicken from dinner, chopped extra fine. No rice tonight, just pure, simple chicken. He'd even warmed it slightly in the microwave, just enough to take the chill off. Mom had smiled when she saw him. Special delivery for the alley cat. She has good taste in chicken, Leo had mumbled, feeling his ears get warm. Now, bowl in hand, he went through the routine. Slow door opening. Careful placement on the second step, right under the slight overhang of the porch roof. Then the sitting. Top step. Knees up. Eyes on the wet street. The rain-slicked cars. The glowing windows of houses where other families were dry and warm. He didn't expect her tonight. Not with the rain. She'd be holed up somewhere drier than this exposed step. Under the cart, probably. He'd checked earlier. It was still there, looking even wobblier in the damp. He was just about to give up, the damp seeping through his jeans, when he saw movement near the bakery stoop. Not the alley. Closer. A small, dark shape slinking low along the building line, using the scant cover of the overhanging eaves. It was her, moving with purpose, her head low, ears slicked back against the rain. She paused at the corner where the bakery wall met the sidewalk, peering towards the blue door house. Her gaze swept the porch, landing on him. She froze. Rain plastered her fur flat, making her look even smaller, skinnier. More like a drowned mouse than a kitten. Leo's heart squeezed. He stayed perfectly still, his gaze drifting over her head towards the dripping lilac bush across the street. I don't see you. I'm just sitting here, being boring. He heard the softest patter-patter of tiny wet paws on wet concrete. He didn't look. He focused on counting the raindrops sliding down the downspout across the yard. Drip 1, drip 2, drip 3. The sound stopped near the bottom of the steps. He could feel her presence now, a weight in the air, a watchfulness. He kept his breathing slow, even. In 2, 3, out 2, 3. A small, wet sniff. The smell of warm chicken must be strong, even in the damp air. Silence stretched, longer than before. The rain whispered secrets to the pavement. Leo's leg muscles started to ache from staying so still. He resisted the urge to shift. Then, the softest click of a claw on wood. The bottom step. He didn't turn his head, but in his peripheral vision, he saw the small gray shape materialize on the step below him. Not hunched over the bowl yet, just standing there, looking up at him. Rainwater dripped from her whiskers, her chin, the ragged tip of her ear. Her green eyes were huge, unblinking, fixed on his profile. He could feel the intensity of her stare. It wasn't fear like before. Not exactly. It was consideration, assessment, like she was weighing him on some invisible scale only she understood. Leo held his breath. He kept his gaze fixed on the middle distance, on the blurred red taillights of a car driving slowly down the wet street. He let his hands, resting loosely on his knees, stay completely relaxed. Click. Another tiny step up. Now she was level with the bowl on the second step. She glanced down at it. The warm steam rising faintly from the chicken seemed to mesmerize her for a second. Her nose twitched. She looked back at Leo. He remained a statue. Slowly, deliberately, she lowered her head. Not to eat, to sniff the chicken. Her nose wrinkled delicately. She took another small step, bringing her body parallel to the bowl, her side only inches from his leg resting on the step below. Leo didn't move a muscle. He could see the individual droplets of rain caught in the fur along her spine. He could see the faint rise and fall of her ribs as she breathed. He could smell the wet, slightly earthy scent of her fur mingling with the warm chicken. She sniffed the chicken again. Then finally, she took a small, delicate bite. She chewed slowly, her eyes still fixed on Leo's face. He stayed still. Another bite.
Chew. Watch.
She ate like that for several minutes, taking a piece of chicken, chewing slowly, her gaze never leaving him. It was unnerving and strangely intimate. He was part of her eating ritual now, a variable she was testing. She finished the last piece, licked the bowl clean with quick, raspy strokes of her tiny pink tongue. Then, instead of immediately retreating, she sat back on her haunches on the step beside the bowl, right next to his leg. She lifted a damp paw and began to wash her face, the rough pads dragging over her eyes, her ears, her whiskers. Methodical, intent. Leo watched her from the corner of his eye. The rain pattered softly on the porch roof. The world felt hushed, wrapped in gray velvet. This small act of grooming, so close, felt like a miracle. A fragile, wet miracle. He had an idea, a crazy idea. He moved his hand, not towards her, just his hand, resting on his knee. He lifted it slowly, slowly, and brought it towards his own face. He scratched his nose, a completely normal, boring human thing to do. The kitten froze mid-lick, paw suspended in the air, her eyes locked onto his hand. Leo lowered his hand slowly back to his knee. He didn't look at her. She stared at his hand for a long moment. Then, cautiously, she resumed washing, but her eyes kept flicking back to his hand. He waited, counted 10 raindrops down the downspout. Then, ever so slowly, he moved his hand again. Not towards her, just an inch along his own knee. He rested his fingertips lightly on the denim. The kitten stopped washing. She watched his fingers. He saw her tiny nostrils flare, scenting the air. He didn't move his hand further. He just let it rest there, an offering of stillness, silence.
Then,
the soft drip, drip, drip from the gutter. Then the impossible happened. The kitten took one tiny, hesitant step closer to his leg. Her damp fur brushed against the side of his jeans. Just the lightest touch. Leo felt it like an electric current. He held his breath. She sniffed his fingertips. A quick, delicate sniff. Her cold, wet nose brushed against his skin.
he didn't twitch.
Didn't pull away. She sniffed again, longer this time. Then, she lifted her head and looked directly into his eyes. Not with fear. Not with calculation. With curiosity. A deep, searching curiosity. Leo looked back. He didn't smile big. Just a tiny, gentle softening around his own eyes. It's okay, he thought, pouring everything he had into that silent message. You're okay. She held his gaze for a long, breathless moment. Her small body was still tense, but the rigid fear was gone, replaced by something softer, something tentative. Then, without warning, she leaned her small, damp head forward, just a fraction of an inch, and pressed her cheek, ever so softly, against his knuckles. It was the lightest touch, fleeting, barely there, like the brush of a falling leaf. But it was real. Warm fur against his skin, cold, wet nose nudging his finger. A sound started,
Low, faint,
barely audible over the rain. A rumble, deep in her tiny chest. It vibrated against his knuckles. A purr. It lasted only a second. The contact, the purr, it was over almost before Leo's brain could register it. She pulled back instantly, as if startled by her own daring. Her eyes widened slightly, but not with fear, with surprise. At herself? At him? She looked at him for one more heartbeat. Then she turned and slipped silently down the steps and into the rainy gloom, vanishing towards the alley. Leo sat frozen on the step, his knuckles tingling where her cheek had touched him. The ghost of a purr echoed in his bones. The rain whispered down. He looked at his hand, then out at the empty alley entrance. A slow, disbelieving smile spread across his face, warm as the chicken had been. It wasn't much. Not a cuddle, not a name, but it was a whisper. The first, fragile whisper of trust. And in the quiet rain, it sounded like the beginning of everything. Ever notice how the smallest things become huge when you're paying attention? A crumb. A raindrop. The space between a boy's sneaker and a kitten's paw on a wet porch step. This isn't just about chicken leftovers anymore. It's about the quiet magic of showing up.
Every
Single.
day.
Rain or shine, the blue bowl appeared. Like clockwork. Around 5:15 p.m., give or take a few minutes. The rhythm of it became a new heartbeat in the alley cat's uncertain world. She'd watch from her chosen vantage point. Sometimes the deep shadow behind the bakery's overflowing dumpster. Sometimes the gap under Mrs. Gable's sagging fence. Sometimes, on bolder days, the damp space beneath the lilac bush across the street. Her eyes, wide and watchful, tracked the blue door. The door would creak open. Sometimes it was the woman, her movements smooth and calm. She'd glance around, not searching hard, just checking. Then she'd place the bowl carefully on the second step, sometimes adding a soft murmur the kitten couldn't quite catch before retreating inside. Other times it was the boy, Leo. His approach was different, quieter, more deliberate. He'd ease the door open slowly, minimizing the groan of the hinges. He'd step out, his gaze immediately sweeping the likely hiding spots, the alley mouth, the bakery stoop, the lilac bush. He looked for her, not with grabbing hands, but with hope, expectation. Then he'd place the bowl, always the same spot, always with the same careful motion. Kneel slightly, set it down gently, so the ceramic didn't clink too loudly against the wood. Sometimes it held warm, shredded chicken. Sometimes tuna flakes mixed with rice. Sometimes a small mound of those dry, crunchy little nuggets that smelled vaguely like fish and felt satisfyingly solid under her teeth. After placing the bowl came the ritual. He'd sit on the top step, not facing her directly, but angled towards the street. He'd pull his knees up, rest his arms on them, and just be
Still.
quiet, like a rock in a stream, letting the world flow around him. This was the part that fascinated her the most. The after. The humans she knew. The ones who shouted, slammed doors through things they never just sat. They rushed. They banged. They disappeared. Leo sat. He breathed. He watched sparrows. He listened to the distant rumble of the city. He became part of the porch. At first, she'd wait until he'd been inside for a long time, until the streetlights buzzed on and the shadows deepened, before daring to approach the bowl. The food was always still there, untouched by other creatures, waiting. But slowly, the gap between the bowl appearing and her emerging from the shadows shrank. 5 minutes, 3 minutes. One day, emboldened by the scent of particularly warm salmon flakes, she darted from the alley shadows while he was still sitting there, his back mostly turned. She'd grabbed a mouthful and scrambled back, heart hammering. He hadn't moved, hadn't startled, just kept being porch furniture. The next time, she stayed a few seconds longer, then the minute. Eating quickly, eyes darting constantly to his still form. He remained motionless, except for the slow rise and fall of his shoulders as he breathed. The bowl itself became a symbol, not just of food, but of predictability, of safety. She learned its weight in Leo's hands meant food was coming. Its placement on the step meant sanctuary, however temporary. Its clean, smooth surface, licked spotless by her own tongue, felt like a tiny victory, a completed transaction. One drizzly afternoon, the bowl held something new, tiny, perfectly round pieces of something pale yellow and soft. She sniffed cautiously. It smelled milky.
Rich.
Different. She took a tiny nibble. It melted instantly on her tongue, creamy and mild.
Cheese.
A tiny, surprised purr rumbled in her chest. She devoured it. Later, watching from the lilac bush, she saw Leo come out to retrieve the empty bowl. He picked it up, saw it was licked clean, and a slow, quiet smile spread across his face. He looked directly towards the bush, not searching hard, just acknowledging, as if to say, "Glad you liked the cheese." The kitten ducked deeper into the leaves, but the warmth of that unseen smile lingered in the damp air. The bowl wasn't just a dish. It was a conversation. A silent, steady, "I'm here." And day by day, drizzle by drizzle, crumb by crumb. She was starting to believe it. The bench appeared on a Tuesday. It wasn't fancy, just old, weathered wood, painted a flaky green once, now mostly bare gray. Leo and his dad wrestled it out the blue door and positioned it carefully on the porch, tucked against the house wall, facing the street. The kitten watched from her alley vantage point, hidden behind a stack of soggy cardboard boxes. She saw Leo pat the seat after they set it down, saw him look towards the lilac bush with a hopeful expression. Her ears flattened slightly. New thing. Unknown thing. The next afternoon, when the blue bowl ritual began, Leo did something different. Instead of sitting on the top step, he walked over and sat on the bench. He placed the bowl, filled with warm chicken bits tonight, not on the step, but on the porch floorboards near the front of the bench, closer to the sidewalk. The kitten froze. This changed everything. The step was familiar territory. The space near this new bench felt exposed. Vulnerable. The step had the house wall at her back when she ate. Here, her back would be open.
Leo sat on the bench.
He didn't look at the bowl, didn't look towards her hiding spots. He just sat, leaning back slightly, one ankle resting on his opposite knee. He pulled a small, flat rectangle from his pocket, his phone, but he didn't tap on it. He just held it loosely in his lap. He looked relaxed, almost bored. The smell of chicken was irresistible. It drifted towards her, a warm, savory siren song. Hunger warred with deep-seated caution. The bench was big. Leo was sitting on it. It felt dominating. Minutes crawled by. Leo didn't move. A squirrel chattered in the oak tree. A car drove past, its tires hissing on the wet street. The kitten's stomach growled. Okay, she thought, gathering her courage.
Just like the step.
Grab and run. She darted from the alley, a low gray streak. She didn't go straight for the bowl. She veered left, slipping silently under the porch itself. It was dark, damp, and smelled of earth and old spiderwebs. Cobwebs brushed her whiskers, but it felt safer, hidden. She could see the bowl through the latticework skirting the porch edge. It sat there, tantalizingly close, just beyond the wooden fringe. She could also see Leo's sneakers, resting on the porch floorboards near the bench legs. Too close. She crouched in the damp dirt under the porch, paralyzed. The chicken was right there, but Leo's feet were right there. She could see the worn blue fabric of his jeans where they met his socks. She heard the soft rustle as he shifted slightly on the bench. He knows I'm here, she realized with a jolt. He'd put the bowl here knowing she might use the space under the porch. This wasn't random. This was strategy. Panic flared. Was it a trap? Lure her close under the porch where she couldn't escape? She tensed, ready to bolt back into the alley. But Leo didn't move. His feet stayed still. He didn't bend down to peer under the porch. He didn't make a sound. He just sat, above her, on the bench. The smell of chicken was overwhelming. Her mouth watered. She took a tiny, shuffling step forward under the porch, keeping low. The latticework was between her and his feet. Protection. Sort of. Another shuffle, closer to the bowl. She could see the individual pieces of chicken now. Her nose pressed against the cool wood of the lattice. Only a few inches separated her from the food, and from Leo's sneakers. She looked at the chicken, looked at the sneaker, back at the chicken. Her stomach cramped. Just be quick. She squeezed her head and one shoulder through a gap in the latticework. It was tight, scraped her fur. She ignored it. Her neck stretched. Her teeth closed on a piece of chicken. She yanked it back through the gap, retreating several feet under the porch, heart pounding. She ate it, crouched in the dirt. It was delicious.
Warm.
Comforting. She looked back at the bowl, still full. Leo's feet hadn't moved. Emboldened, she crept forward again. This time, she didn't retreat after grabbing a piece. She stayed near the lattice, hunched protectively over her prize, eating it where she was. She kept one eye fixed on Leo's sneakers. Nothing happened. Piece by piece, she pulled chicken through the latticework. She ate until the bowl was empty. Her belly felt comfortably full. The fear hadn't gone away, but it had settled into a low hum. manageable. She licked her lips, savoring the last taste. She looked at Leo's feet. They shifted slightly. She tensed, but he just crossed his other ankle over his knee. A normal movement, not threatening. Curiosity, that old feline itch, began to stir. What was he doing up there? Just sitting? Slowly, cautiously, she lifted her head a little higher, peering through a different gap in the latticework.
She could see more now.
His knees, his hands resting loosely in his lap, holding that flat rectangle, the edge of his jacket. Then she saw his face. He was looking out at the street, but his eyes seemed unfocused,
Distant.
not watching for her, not watching for anything in particular, just being. His expression was calm, peaceful, even. A strange feeling washed over her.
Not fear.
Not hunger, something else. A sense of shared quiet. He was sitting in the open, relaxed. She was hidden under the porch, full-bellied. The rain started again, a soft patter on the porch roof above him, a muffled drumming on the earth around her. For the first time, hiding didn't feel like cowering. It felt like coexisting, sharing the same patch of damp world, separated only by a thin wall of wood, both content in their own spaces. She watched his still form as the light faded, the rhythmic sound of the rain and his slow, steady breathing weaving a strange, comforting lullaby in the gathering dusk. The bench, once a threat, had become part of the shelter. The space under the porch became her new dining room. The latticework was her window. Leo's bench was her ceiling. And the blue bowl, placed faithfully near its edge every evening, was her centerpiece. Leo stuck to his routine. Out with the bowl. Place it near the bench.
Sit. Breathe. Be still.
Sometimes he'd have his phone, sometimes a book. Once he even brought out a small sketch pad and a pencil. She'd watched, fascinated, as the pencil whispered across the paper. A soft, rhythmic scratch, scratch, scratch that blended with the rustling leaves and distant traffic. He didn't look under the porch. He just drew. Her own routine evolved. She'd emerged from the alley earlier now, sometimes even before he brought the bowl out, slipping under the porch to wait. It felt safer than the open alley entrance. Drier, too, when it rained. She'd watch his feet arrive, hear the soft thump of the bowl being set down, smell the evening's offering. She stopped retreating after grabbing each piece of food. She'd eat right at the latticework, pulling pieces through one by one, keeping a wary eye on his feet. The distance between his sneakers and her nose felt vast, but it was shrinking, inch by inch, meal by meal. She noticed things. The scuff mark on his left shoe. The way the laces were slightly frayed. The pattern of the socks he wore, stripes one day, solid colors another. One evening, the bowl held something particularly fragrant, tiny flakes of cooked fish mixed with warm rice. She was pulling a piece through the lattice when Leo shifted on the bench. He uncrossed his legs and let his feet rest flat on the porch floorboards. His right foot was now significantly closer to the latticework. Dangerously close. The kitten froze, a piece of fish halfway to her mouth. His big sneaker was only about a foot away from her nose, separated only by the thin wooden slats. She could see the texture of the canvas, the dried mud spatters near the sole. She could practically feel the warmth radiating from it. Panic fluttered in her chest. Too close. She dropped the fish, ready to scramble back into the deeper darkness under the porch. But Leo didn't move. His foot stayed exactly where it was. He didn't wiggle his toes, didn't tap. It was just there, solid, still, like the rest of him. She stared at the sneaker. Her heart pounded against her ribs. The smell of the abandoned fish piece was maddening. Her hunger warred with the primal urge to flee. He hasn't moved. A tiny voice inside her reasoned, sounding suspiciously like the memory of warm chicken and quiet sitting. He never moves to grab. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, she lowered her head back down to the piece of fish. She kept her eyes locked on the sneaker. She picked up the fish.
Chewed.
Swallowed. All the while watching that big, still foot. Nothing happened. She took another piece. Ate it. The sneaker remained. Emboldened, She stretched her neck a little further through the gap for the next piece. Her nose was only inches from the lattice now, closer to his foot. She could smell the faint, earthy scent of damp canvas and old rubber. It wasn't an unpleasant smell, just human. Leo smell. She ate another piece, and another. The sneaker was a constant presence in her peripheral vision, a monument to stillness. The next night, Leo placed the bowl as usual. He sat, but this time he didn't cross his legs at all. He sat with both feet flat on the floorboards, and he placed them deliberately a little closer to the latticework than before. The kitten noticed. Her whiskers twitched.
Testing.
She ate her meal piece by piece, her eyes flicking constantly between the food and his feet. They were closer, yes, but they remained utterly still. Solid. Predictable. The night after that, she didn't wait for the fish. She emerged from the alley as soon as she saw Leo sit down with the bowl. She slipped under the porch and went straight to the lattice. The bowl sat there, steaming slightly in the cool evening air. Leo's feet were already planted, close but not crowding.
She didn't hesitate.
She started eating immediately, pulling pieces through the lattice. Her body relaxed, her tail curled loosely around her paws. She glanced at his feet occasionally, but the frantic watchfulness was gone, replaced by a simple awareness. He's there. He's still. Halfway through her meal, Leo did something new. He moved his foot, not towards her, just a tiny adjustment. He slid his right foot maybe an inch sideways on the floorboard. It made a soft, gritty sound, shhhhd. The kitten paused mid-bite, a piece of chicken hanging from her mouth. Her eyes snapped to the foot. It had stopped moving. It was just resting in its new position.
Still.
She looked at it, looked at the piece of chicken, swallowed. Then, deliberately, she stretched her neck through the latticework again, reaching for the next piece. Her head was now directly adjacent to where his foot had been moments before. She could have stretched out a paw and touched his shoelace. She didn't, but she was aware of the proximity. The warmth radiating from the canvas seemed stronger. She ate the chicken, her purse starting up a low, hesitant rumble she couldn't quite suppress. It vibrated softly in the confined space under the porch. Leo didn't react. He didn't look down. He just sat, breathing slowly, his presence a quiet anchor in the twilight. But the kitten saw it, a tiny, almost imperceptible softening in the line of his shoulders, a relaxation that hadn't been there before. She finished the bowl, licked it clean, the rasp of her tongue loud in the quiet under the porch. She sat back, full and content. She looked at Leo's foot, so close to the lattice. Then, slowly, deliberately, she did something she hadn't planned. She stretched out one small, white-tipped paw, not through the lattice, just towards it. She extended her claws ever so slightly and gently, silently, scratched the inside of the wooden slat closest to his shoe.
Scritch. Scritch.
It wasn't a sharp sound, just a soft whisper of claw on old, dry wood. A tiny, private marking. I was here. This is my space, too. She saw Leo's foot twitch, just a tiny flex of his toes inside the sneaker. He'd heard. He knew. She pulled her paw back quickly, tucking it under her chest, suddenly shy. But the warmth in her own chest, the steady rumble of her purr, didn't stop. She watched his foot. It stayed still, but she felt the change. The air under the porch, the space between the lattice and the bench, felt different, charged with a silent understanding. He didn't move his foot away. He left it there, close, present, acknowledging her tiny scritch in the quiet dark. One paw closer, every single day. Ever leave the light on for someone? Or maybe set an extra place at the table, just in case? That's what the faded blue blanket on the porch was. Not just fabric. An invitation. A silent, hopeful you belong here too. And one rainy Tuesday, the loneliest little soul in the world decided. Maybe she did. The change happened subtly, like frost creeping over a window pane. One evening, Leo placed the blue bowl, as usual, near the bench. But beside it, something new lay folded on the dry porch floorboards, a rectangle of thick, nubby fabric, faded to a soft blue-gray like old denim. It looked worn, comfortable, and utterly out of place on the bare wood. The kitten, already nestled in her under-porch vantage point, froze.
New thing.
Unknown thing. Her eyes darted from the bowl, smelling enticingly of warm turkey, to the strange blue square. It didn't move, didn't smell like danger. Just wool,
Dust?
and faintly, underneath, a scent she couldn't place, clean, dry, and vaguely like Leo's house. Sunshine on curtains, maybe. Leo sat on the bench, his sketch pad open on his lap. He didn't look at the blanket, didn't gesture towards it. He just started drawing, the pencil making it soft, familiar scratch, scratch, scratch. His feet, clad in familiar scuffed sneakers, rested calmly on the floorboards near the latticework. Hunger was a powerful motivator. The turkey's smell won out. The kitten slipped her head and shoulders through her usual gap, snagged a piece of meat, and retreated to eat it safely under the porch. Her eyes, however, kept flicking back to the blue square. It sat there, innocuous, waiting. Piece by piece, she worked through the turkey. Each time she emerged to grab food, the blanket was still there, unmoving. Leo remained absorbed in his drawing, his breathing slow and even. Finally, the bowl was empty, licked clean. The kitten sat back, her belly comfortably full. Her gaze lingered on the blanket. Curiosity, that persistent feline spark, flared brighter than caution for a moment. What is it? Slowly, cautiously, she crept closer to the latticework, not to grab food, but to look. She pressed her nose against the gap, sniffing intently. The wool smell was stronger here, mingled with that clean, sun-dried scent. It smelled safe.
Quiet.
She saw a loose thread dangling from one corner of the blanket. It twitched slightly in the evening breeze. Her hunter's instincts kicked in. Prey? Her tail gave an involuntary little flick. She glanced at Leo. He was shading something on his paper, his brow furrowed in concentration. His foot hadn't moved. Just a quick sniff. Outside. Gathering her courage, she squeezed fully through her usual gap, emerging onto the porch floorboards for the first time after finishing her meal. She wasn't fleeing. She was exploring. Her heart hammered, but the lingering warmth of the food and Leo's stillness held her panic at bay. She kept her body low, belly fur brushing the cool wood. She approached the blanket sideways, crab-like, ready to bolt at the slightest provocation. 3 feet away, 2 feet, 1 foot. She stopped, stretched her neck, sniffed the edge of the fabric. The wool smell filled her nostrils. It was dense, earthy. Beneath it, that comforting Sun-An house scent was stronger. She touched her nose to the edge. The texture was bumpy, slightly scratchy, but not unpleasant, different from concrete, wood, or fur. She looked at Leo. He hadn't moved, his pencil still scratched. Emboldened, she took one tiny step closer. Her front paw hovered over the edge of the blanket. The wood grain felt familiar beneath her other paw. The blanket was unknown territory. She lowered her paw, slowly, slowly, until the white-tipped pad just barely brushed the blue fabric. It felt soft, not like for soft, deeper, warmer. It yielded slightly under her tiny weight. She pulled her paw back instantly, as if shocked, stared at the spot where it had touched. Nothing happened. The blanket didn't bite. Leo didn't leap. She looked at the dangling thread again.
Closer now.
Definitely prey. Her instincts hummed. Forgetting caution for a glorious second, she pounced. A tiny, silent leap, landing with both front paws squarely on the edge of the blanket. Her claws snagged satisfyingly in the nubby weave. Gotcha. She gave the thread a quick, playful bat with her other paw. The sudden movement made her freeze. She'd moved. On the porch. In the open. Near Leo. She whipped her head around, eyes wide, expecting him to be lunging, shouting something. He was still drawing, but now he was smiling. A small, soft smile, directed at his sketch pad, as if he'd seen her tiny victory in his peripheral vision and approved. He didn't look up. didn't stop her. The fear receded, replaced by a giddy rush of triumph. She'd pounced on the porch, and nothing bad happened. She looked down at her paws, firmly planted on the blue fabric. It felt solid,
Secure.
and wonderfully, unexpectedly warm. The sun must have warmed it earlier, and the thick wool held the heat. It seeped into her paw pads, chasing away the lingering chill of the damp earth under the porch. She didn't run. She stood there, paws on the blanket, head held high, surveying her new domain, the edge of the blue square. The porch felt different from this vantage point. Wider, brighter, less like a place to hide, more like a place to be. Leo turned a page in his sketchpad. The sound made her ears twitch, but she didn't bolt. She just watched him, a new kind of awareness dawning. He wasn't just the bowl bringer, the quiet sitter. He was the blanket bringer too, the bringer of warmth and softness and unexpected play. She gave the thread one last, gentle bat, then turned and slipped gracefully back through the latticework into her underporch sanctuary. But she left her paws feeling warmer than they had in weeks. And she didn't run. Not really. She retreated, carrying the memory of warmth and safety on her pads. The blue blanket stayed. It became as much a part of the evening ritual as the bowl or Leo's presence on the bench. Sometimes it lay neatly folded. Sometimes it was rumpled, kicked slightly askew by Leo's feet when he shifted. But it was always there, waiting. The kitten's relationship with it evolved rapidly. First, it was just a thing to sniff cautiously after finishing her meal. Then, a surface to tentatively place one paw upon. Then, two paws. Then, one astonishing evening, she found herself sitting fully on its very edge, her tail curled neatly around her feet, simply existing on the porch floorboards in the open air. She never stayed long those first few times, just long enough to feel the profound difference between the hard, cool wood and the yielding, sun-warmed softness of the blanket. It felt luxurious,
Decadent.
like something reserved for the warm, safe creatures inside the glowing houses. One afternoon, a cold drizzle started earlier than usual. The kitten huddled under the porch, listening to the steady drip, drip, drip from the roof edge onto the muddy ground. The air felt damp and chilly, seeping into her fur. She watched the rain bead on the latticework, blurring her view of the porch. Leo arrived, hood pulled up against the drizzle. He placed the bowl, tonight, kibble with a few enticing flakes of sardine on top, near the bench. Then he bent down and picked up the blue blanket. The kitten tensed. Was he taking it away?
But no.
He shook it out gently, sending a faint puff of dust motes dancing in the wet air. Then, deliberately, he spread it out fully on the driest patch of porch floorboards, right under the overhang where the rain couldn't reach. He smoothed it with his hand, making it nice and flat. He placed the bowl carefully on the very edge of it. He sat on the bench, pulling his hood lower. The kitten could see raindrops glistening on his jacket sleeve. The smell of sardines was intoxicating. Hunger warred with the damp chill. The blanket looked incredibly inviting spread out like that, a dry island in the wet world. She squeezed through the lattice. The drizzle immediately spotted her fur. She hurried to the bowl, snatched a piece of kibble, and instinctively retreated back towards the gap. But halfway there, she stopped. The blanket was right there.
Dry.
Warm-looking. She looked at the rain streaking down beyond the porch roof. Looked at the damp patch already forming on the wood where she stood. Looked at the smooth, dry expanse of blue wool. Just for a second, while I eat this piece. She took a hesitant step onto the blanket. The dry, slightly scratchy softness welcomed her paws. She ate the kibble standing there. The drizzle couldn't touch her here. She felt sheltered. She took another piece from the bowl, ate it, still standing on the blanket. Her fur began to relax, shedding the tension of the damp. Maybe sitting? Slowly, carefully, she lowered her hindquarters, settled onto the blanket. It felt even better sitting down. The wool cradled her, insulating her from the cool wood beneath. She curled her tail around herself, tucking her paws in close. She ate another piece of kibble, then another. Her body relaxed, her eyes half closed in contentment. The rain drummed a soft rhythm on the roof, a soothing counterpoint to the crunch of kibble. She finished the bowl, licked it clean. The rain continued. She didn't feel the urgent need to retreat. The blanket was dry. The porch felt safe. Leo was a quiet, still presence on the bench, a silent guardian against the wet world.
She stayed.
Curled on the blanket, full-bellied and dry. She watched the rain paint patterns on the sidewalk, watched a worm wriggle desperately in a puddle near the curb. She felt the gentle vibration of Leo shifting slightly on the bench. A deep sense of peace settled over her, warm and heavy as the blanket itself. This wasn't just shelter from the rain. This was rest, real rest. Not the tense dozing of hiding under a cart, always alert for danger. This was letting go, sinking into softness, feeling safe enough to simply be still. She tucked her nose under her tail, the clean wool smell filling her senses. Her eyes drifted closed. The rhythm of the rain and Leo's slow breathing blended into a lullaby. For the first time since she could remember, she fell asleep not out of exhaustion or cold, but out of pure, warm contentment. On a blue blanket, on a porch, near a boy who sat very, very still. She woke later to the soft creak of the blue door opening. Leo's mom stood there, holding a mug. Her eyes widened slightly, then softened into a warm smile as she saw the small gray mound curled on the blanket. "Well, hello there," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. The kitten blinked sleepily, momentarily startled, but not terrified. The blanket's warmth still held her. Leo's presence on the bench anchored her. She didn't bolt. She just watched the woman with wide, calm eyes. "Don't mind me, sweet pea," the woman murmured. "Just checking on my boy. Didn't expect to see you all cozy." She took a sip from her mug, her gaze gentle. "That old blanket's seen a lot of naps. Glad it's finally good for something again." She retreated back inside, closing the door softly. The kitten yawned, stretching her front legs, her claws kneading the soft wool unconsciously. She looked at the spot where the woman had stood. Then she looked at Leo. He was watching her now, a quiet smile on his face. He didn't say anything, just nodded once slowly. She tucked her nose back under her tail, the warmth of the blanket, the memory of the woman's soft voice, and the quiet approval in Leo's eyes weaving a new kind of safety around her. She closed her eyes again. The soft place to rest had become a haven. Sunlight, weak but welcome, filtered through the clouds one afternoon, dappling the porch floorboards. The blue blanket lay spread out, basking in the patches of light. The kitten was already there, curled in a tight ball right in the center of a sunbeam, soaking in the warmth. Her purr was a steady, contented rumble, loud enough to be heard a few feet away. Leo came out with the bowl, tiny shreds of leftover roast beef tonight. He smiled when he saw her already on the blanket. He placed the bowl near her, but not so close as to disturb her sunbeam. He sat on the bench, but instead of his sketch pad or book, he had nothing. He just sat, leaning back, his face tilted towards the weak sun. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. The kitten watched him through slitted eyes, her purr uninterrupted. Then he started to hum. It wasn't a tune she recognized. Not really a tune at all. Just a low, soft series of notes, wandering up and down without a clear pattern. It was deep in his chest, resonant and warm, like the blanket felt beneath her. The sound vibrated gently in the quiet air. It wasn't loud. It wasn't directed at her. It seemed to just drift out of him like breath. The kitten's purr stuttered for a second. New sound. Her ears swiveled forward, listening intently. It flowed, gentle and constant, like a stream over smooth stones. There was no thread in it.
No sharpeguis.
It felt as natural as the wind sighing in the leaves or the distant rumble of the city. She relaxed back into her sunbeam. Her purr started again, a little louder this time, syncing almost unconsciously with the rhythm of his hum. Arr. It felt good. The sound wrapped around her, blending with the warmth of the sun and the softness of the blanket. It felt like safety had a sound, Leo opened his eyes, still humming softly. He looked at her, not staring, just acknowledging her presence. His gaze was calm, peaceful. He didn't stop humming. The kitten stretched languidly, arching her back, her claws flexing into the blanket. She wasn't hungry yet. The sun and the hum were sustenance enough for the moment. She settled back down, her body loose and relaxed. She watched him, her green eyes half-lidded. He shifted slightly on the bench, still humming. The low vibration seemed to fill the space between them, a tangible bridge of sound. She felt it resonate in her own chest, mingling with her purr. Slowly, almost without thought, she uncurled. She stretched out one front paw, then the other, pushing her chest forward, her chin resting on the blanket between her paws. She was no longer a tight ball. She was sprawled, vulnerable, belly partially exposed to the warm air. Her eyes remained fixed on Leo, her purr a steady counterpoint to his hum. He didn't move towards her, didn't stop humming. He just watched her stretch, his expression soft. Emboldened by the sound, the warmth, the profound sense of safety, she did something she hadn't done since she was a tiny scrap nursing beside her mother. She rolled. Not a full roll, just a slow, deliberate twist onto her side, exposing the soft, pale fur of her belly to the weak sunlight. She kept her head turned towards Leo, watching him. Her purr deepened, vibrating through her exposed flank. Leo's hum hitched for a second, a soft intake of breath. Then it resumed, even softer, even warmer. He didn't look away. His gaze held hers, filled with a quiet wonder. She lay like that, belly exposed, purring, bathed in sunlight and the low, resonant hum coming from the boy on the bench. The world narrowed to this patch of porch, this blue blanket, this shared, wordless song. After a while, her stomach rumbled, reminding her of the roast beef nearby. She slowly rolled back onto her belly, stretched again, and padded the few steps to the bowl. She ate slowly, savoring the tender meat, her purr never stopping. Leo's hum continued, a gentle backdrop to her meal. When she finished, she didn't immediately return to her sprawled position. She sat near the bowl, licking her paws clean. She looked at Leo. He was watching her, still humming softly. A thought flickered, bold and bright. Closer. She stood up, padded deliberately across the blanket, not towards the safety of the latticework, but towards the bench, towards Leo's feet. She stopped about 2 feet away. His sneakers looked enormous from this angle. She could see the intricate pattern of the laces, the scuffs on the toe. She looked up at him. His humming didn't falter. His expression remained calm, open. She took one step closer, then another. She was now within arm's reach of his legs. She could smell the denim of his jeans, the faint scent of soap and boy. She sat down, right there, not on the blanket near the bench, but on the bare floorboards just beside his left sneaker. She curled her tail neatly around her paws. She looked straight ahead, not at his face, but her body was angled towards him. Her purr rumbled steadily. Leo's hum changed. It softened further, becoming almost a whisper of sound. He didn't move his feet, didn't reach down. He just kept humming, a low, soothing frequency that seemed to vibrate the very air around them. The kitten closed her eyes. She felt the residual warmth of the sun on the floorboards beneath her. She felt the solid presence of the bench and the boy above her. She felt the deep, resonant hum flowing over her like warm water. And she felt her own purr, strong and steady, answering it. She wasn't touching him, but she was with him, sharing the same space, the same quiet afternoon, the same gentle sound. The blue blanket lay nearby, a symbol of comfort offered. But the real comfort, the profound belonging, was right here, in the shared stillness, in the boy's humming voice and the answering song in her own chest. She wasn't just near the door anymore. She was on the threshold, and it sounded like home. You know that feeling when you stand at an open door, not sure whether to step through? Half of you pulled forward by warmth and light, half held back by every safe instinct screaming, "Stay where you know." That's exactly where our little gray friend found herself one autumn evening, whiskers twitching on the very edge of everything new. The air changed. That was the first thing the kitten noticed. It was a crisp October evening, the kind where the setting sun painted the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples, and the air held the sharp, clean scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. She was curled on her blue blanket, having finished a dinner of warm salmon flakes, her purr a soft engine of contentment. Leo sat on the bench, not humming tonight, but whittling a small piece of wood with a careful, rhythmic scrape of his knife. The blue door opened, not with Leo's usual careful easing, but wider. It was Leo's mom, carrying a basket overflowing with rumpled laundry. She smiled at the kitten. "Cozy out here, little one," she murmured, her voice warm. She didn't stop, heading down the porch steps towards a side gate that led to the backyard. And she left the door open. Not wide open, just ajar, maybe 6 inches. A sliver of warm, golden light spilled onto the porch floorboards, painting a long, inviting rectangle. Warm air, carrying the complex, comforting smells of inside. Something savory cooking, onions, herbs, the faint tang of lemon cleaner, the unique scent of lived-in spaces, books, fabric, people, flowed out, wrapping around the kitten like an invisible embrace. It was a smell richer, deeper, and infinitely more enveloping than the porch air, even with its blanket and its boy. The kitten sat up straight, her purr stuttering to a stop. Every muscle tensed, her ears pricked forward, swiveling towards the open door. Her pupils dilated, huge and black in the dimming light. The open door was a void, a promise, a terrifying unknown. Leo stopped whittling. He didn't look at the door, didn't look at her. He kept his gaze fixed on the small shape emerging from the wood in his hands. But his knife stilled. His breathing seemed to slow, deepen. He became a statue of deliberate calm. The kitten stared at the sliver of light. The smells pulled at her, irresistible. Warmth radiated from the opening, a tangible force compared to the cooling evening air on the porch. She could hear faint sounds now, amplified by the opening. The gentle blip-blip of a dishwasher, the low murmur of a radio playing soft music somewhere deep inside, the comforting tick-tock of a clock. Her instincts warred violently.
Go.
Warmth, food smells, safety, screamed one part. Trap, walls, enclosure,
No escape.
shrieked the other, louder, fueled by a lifetime of alleys and freedom. She took one tiny, hesitant step off the blanket, towards the light. The floorboards felt colder, without the wool beneath her paws. She stopped, looked back at Leo. He remained still, his profile calm in the twilight.
Scrape.
He started whittling again. The sound was soft, rhythmic, grounding. Not a threat, just
Latte.
being Leo. The kitten looked back at the door. The smells intensified. She thought of the blue blanket, brought out for her. The bowl that always appeared. The stillness that meant safety. Leo hadn't trapped her under the porch. He hadn't grabbed her when she touched his shoe. He'd brought softness.
Warmth.
Sound that felt like safety. Maybe. She took another step, closer to the rectangle of light. She could feel the warmth now on her whiskers, a delicious contrast to the cool air on her back. She stopped at the very edge of the light, her front paws on the warm, illuminated wood, her back paws still on the cooler, shadowed porch. Her nose twitched furiously, sampling the intoxicating indoor air. Blip blip.
Tick-tock.
Scrape scrape. She stretched her neck. Her nose crossed the threshold. Whiskers first. They brushed the slightly warmer air just inside the doorway. Sensitive, probing.
No shock. No grab.
Just there. Warm, fragrant, inside air. She pulled her head back, looked at Leo. His knife moved steadily.
Scrape.
Scrape. Heart pounding so hard she felt it in her throat. She took the final step. Both front paws crossed the threshold. She stood just inside the blue door, on smooth, cool linoleum.
The world changed.
The light was warmer, yellower than the porch light. The smells were overwhelming, layered, complex, wonderful. The sounds were clearer, closer. The space felt contained. Walls rose around her. A ceiling closed overhead. It should have felt claustrophobic, terrifying. But the warmth seeped into her chilled paws. The familiar tick-tock of the clock was steady, reassuring. And behind her, through the open door, she could still see the edge of her blue blanket, the familiar shape of Leo on the bench, the darkening sky, an escape route. She didn't bolt. She stood frozen just inside the door, her body trembling slightly, her senses on overload, drinking in the miracle of inside. Whiskers forward, ears swiveling, she mapped this new frontier, one trembling paw on smooth linoleum. The kitten stood just inside the doorway, a small gray sentinel on the threshold. The linoleum felt cool and unyielding beneath her paws, utterly different from wood or concrete or wool. The walls seemed to press in, yet the warmth radiating from the house's core pulled her forward. It was a confusing, overwhelming sensation. Blip blip. The dishwasher hummed from a room to her left.
TikTok.
The clock marked steady time from a hallway straight ahead. From deeper within the house, the soft murmur of the radio continued. Gentle piano music now, notes falling like soft rain. But beneath these familiar sounds, new smells assaulted her senses. The savory cooking smell was stronger here, onions, garlic, maybe chicken? Coming from the room to the left, kitchen, her instincts whispered, though she had no name for it. There was the clean, sharp scent of lemon polish, overlaying something deeper, earthier, potted plants, and woven through it all, the unique scent of the humans who lived here. Leo's familiar boy smell, soap, graphite, sunshine. His mother's softer scent, floral soap, wool, coffee, and a fainter, older smell, pipe tobacco, paper, leather, grandpa. She glimpsed him sometimes through the windows. Then, cutting through the complexity like a bright ribbon, came a new smell.
Sweet, rich, warm.
Unbelievably enticing. It floated on the warm air currents, stronger than the savory smells, sweeter than the lemon. It smelled like sunshine and cream and something deeply comforting she couldn't name. Cookies? Her nose lifted, twitching furiously. Her focus narrowed. The fear, the overwhelming newness, momentarily forgotten. That smell, where was it coming from? She took a tentative step further inside, away from the open door. The linoleum gave way to a softer, nubbier surface beneath her paws, carpet. It felt strange, muffling her footsteps. She paused, listening. The house sounds continued, unchanged.
No scouts.
No running feet. The sweet smell was stronger here. It seemed to be coming from the room straight ahead, down the short hallway where the clock ticked. The living room. She'd seen its warm glow from outside countless times. She looked back. The rectangle of the open door was still there, framing the twilight porch, Leo's still form on the bench, the edge of her blue blanket. Safety. Escape. She looked down the hallway. The sweet smell beckoned. Irresistible. Just a little further.
Just to see.
She crept down the hallway, her body low, her steps silent on the carpet. Every sense was hyper-alert. The walls here were lined with pictures. She glimpsed blurred faces, colors, but her focus was on the smell. It grew stronger with every step, filling her nostrils, making her mouth water. It wasn't like the fish or chicken Leo brought. This was different.
Pure, sweet pleasure.
She reached the end of the hallway. The living room opened up before her. Warm lamplight pooled on a soft-looking rug. A big, squashy couch took up one wall. An armchair sat near a bookshelf overflowing with books. And there, on a low wooden table in front of the couch, sat the source of the smell. A plate. On the plate, a stack of round, lumpy, golden brown discs. They were still faintly steaming. And the smell, oh, the smell. It was caramelized sugar, melted butter, warm vanilla, and something else dark, rich, enticing. Chocolate chips. The kitten stopped dead in the doorway, transfixed. She'd scavenged many things, sour milk, greasy fries, stale bread, but nothing had ever smelled like this. This smelled like heaven baked into a circle. A soft gasp came from the armchair. The kitten's head snapped around. Leo's grandpa sat there. A book opens on his lap, his glasses perched on his nose. He was looking right at her, his eyes wide with surprise, then softening into a warm, crinkled smile. "Well, I'll be," he murmured, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Look who decided to come in from the cold." Panic flared. Seen. Trapped. She tensed to bolt, her gaze darting back to the hallway, the distant open door. But the old man didn't move. He didn't reach for her. He didn't shout. He just smiled that warm, crinkly smile and slowly, deliberately, closed his book. The soft thump of the covers meeting was the only sound besides the ticking clock and the distant dishwasher. "Don't mind me, little miss," he said softly, his voice like dry leaves rustling. "Just enjoying the evening. And the cookies." He nodded slightly towards the plate on the table. Fresh out of the oven. Martha's famous chocolate chip. He settled back in his chair, folding his hands over his book. He didn't stare at her. He looked towards a window, watching the last streaks of orange fade from the sky, his expression peaceful. The kitten stayed frozen in the doorway. Her heart hammered, but the old man's stillness mirrored Leo's. His voice, though deep, held no threat, only quiet welcome. And the smell of the cookies, it was an anchor, a siren's song pulling her away from the panic. Slowly, cautiously, she turned her attention back to the plate. The cookies glowed golden under the lamplight. A tiny wisp of steam still curled from the top one. The chocolate chips looked like melted treasure. She took one step into the living room, then another. The carpet felt plush beneath her paws, springy and deep. She kept one eye on the old man. He remained still, watching the darkening window. She reached the edge of the rug. The coffee table was low. The plate sat tantalizingly close. The smell was almost painful in its intensity. She stretched her neck. Her nose was inches from the bottom cookie. The warmth radiated from it. The sweet, buttery, chocolatey scent filled her universe. She could practically taste it. She glanced at the old man. He hadn't moved. Just one tiny crumb? Her pink tongue flicked out, lightning fast. Not touching the cookie, just tasting the air right above it. The sweetness exploded on her tongue, rich and complex. She pulled back, startled by the intensity, looked at the old man. He was smiling faintly, still looking out the window, but she saw the corner of his mouth twitch. Emboldened, she stretched again. This time, her tongue touched the very edge of the bottom cookie. It was warm, slightly crisp, unbelievably sweet. A tiny, sticky crumb clung to her tongue. She licked it off, savoring the burst of vanilla and butter and melting chocolate. A tiny, involuntary MRRP of pure delight escaped her. The old man chuckled softly, a warm, rumbling sound deep in his chest. "Good, huh? Martha always adds extra chocolate chips." The kitten looked at him, the sound of his chuckles strangely comforting, not frightening. She looked back at the cookie. The tiny spot she'd licked glistened slightly. She didn't take a bite. She wasn't that brave. Not yet. But she sat down, right there on the plush rug at the foot of the coffee table, her eyes fixed on the plate of warm cookies, her tiny pink tongue flicking out occasionally as if to catch lingering sweetness in the air. The old man's presence, the ticking clock, the distant hum of the house, and the overwhelming, glorious smell of chocolate chip cookies wove a spell of safety deeper than any blanket. She was inside, and it smelled like hope baked warm. The sudden clunk screech from the kitchen was like a gunshot in the quiet living room. The kitten shot straight into the air, a puffball of pure terror, landing with a soft thump back on the rug. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird.
Danger.
Noise. Trap. Before she could even think, instinct took over. She dove, not towards the distant, glowing rectangle of the open front door down the hall, but towards the nearest, darkest shelter. She scrambled under the big, squashy couch, squeezing into the narrow space between the dusty floorboards and the sagging fabric undercarriage. Darkness enveloped her. Dust tickled her nose. The smell here was different. Old lint, dried carpet fibers, maybe a forgotten dust bunny or two. It was cramped and close, but it was hidden. She pressed herself flat against the cool wood floor, trembling violently, her eyes wide and unseeing in the gloom. Whoops. Sorry about that. Leo's mom's voice floated in from the kitchen, cheerful and unconcerned. Dropped the colander. Sounded like you dropped the whole sink, Martha. Grandpa called back, his voice laced with amusement. Oh, hush you. Martha laughed. Their voices were normal.
Calm. No alarm.
No running feet. Just life happening. The kitten stayed frozen under the couch, the panic slowly receding, leaving behind shaky aftershocks. She heard footsteps approach the living room doorway. Light spilled across the carpet near the couch. She's still here, Dad? Martha asked softly. Was Grandpa rumbled. Took a liking to your cookies. Then you went and dropped the Armageddon colander. Scared her under the couch. Oh no. Martha's voice was full of gentle regret. Poor little Scrap. I didn't mean to frighten her. The kitten heard her kneel down. The light shifted as Martha's had appeared near the floor, peering into the darkness under the couch. The kitten shrank back further, pressing herself impossibly flatter. Hey, sweet pea, Martha murmured, her voice low and soothing. I'm so sorry. Just clumsy old me. No need to be scared. You're safe as houses under there. She didn't reach in, didn't try to coax her out. She just stayed there, her face a kind blur in the dim light filtering under the couch. Those cookies are pretty good, aren't they? You have excellent taste. She stayed like that for a long moment, just talking softly, her voice a gentle murmur weaving through the kitten's fear. Leo's still on the porch, you know, keeping watch. Door's still open. You can come out whenever you like, or stay right there. Whatever makes you feel safe, honey. After a while, Martha sighed softly. All right, little one, I'll leave you be. No more loud noises, I promise. She stood up. The light shifted again. Her footsteps retreated back towards the kitchen, quieter this time. Silence returned, broken only by the ticking clock and Grandpa's soft breathing in his chair. The kitten remained under the couch, but the frantic edge of her terror had dulled. Martha's voice, her apology, her reassurance, they hadn't erased the fear, but they'd softened its sharpness. She hadn't tried to grab. She'd respected the hiding place. She lifted her head slightly, peering out from her dusty sanctuary. She could see the bottom of the coffee table, the legs of the armchair where Grandpa sat, and a slice of the plush rug. The plate of cookies was still there, smelling just as divine. The open front door was a distant glow down the hall. She could bolt.
Right now.
Back to the porch, the blanket, the known world. But the couch above her felt solid, protective. The dust smelled old, but not threatening. The house sounds continued. The tick-tock, the soft murmur of Martha, now back in the kitchen, the faint radio music. They weren't scary noises. They were background, the sound of a living, breathing house. And she was hidden, safely hidden. They knew she was there, but they weren't disturbing her. Martha had promised no more loud noises. Slowly, tentatively, she uncurled slightly. She wasn't pressed flat anymore. She sat up a little in the cramped space, tucking her paws under her. The trembling subsided. She looked towards the coffee table eggs. A tiny fragment of something brown lay on the carpet near one leg. A cookie crumb. Must have fallen when she startled. Hunger, momentarily forgotten in the panic, nudged her. The crumb was close. Just a quick dart out. She crept to the very edge of the darkness under the couch. Peered out. Grandpa was still in his chair, reading his book again now, his glasses low on his nose. He didn't look her way. Gathering her courage, she darted out. A quick, silent streak of gray. She snatched the crumb in her mouth and scrambled back under the couch. Safe. The crumb was small, but packed with that incredible sweet, buttery, chocolatey flavor. She licked her lips, savoring it. It tasted even better earned. She stayed under the couch, but it felt different now. Not just a panic hole, a temporary shelter, a safe observation post. She watched the room from her shadowed vantage point. She saw Leo appear quietly in the hallway. He stood near the open front door, looking into the living room. His gaze swept over the couch, stopping where she hid. He smiled a small, understanding smile. He didn't come closer. He just leaned against the doorframe, a silent guardian. Martha came back in, carrying a mug. She walked calmly to the coffee table, picked up the plate of cookies, and took one. She didn't look under the couch. She just smiled at Grandpa. Still the best. Always, Martha. Always. She walked back towards the kitchen, humming softly. The kitten watched it all. The comfortable rhythm, the easy affection, the respect for her hiding place. The warmth of the house seeped into her dusty sanctuary under the couch. The fear didn't vanish, but it folded itself into a smaller, manageable corner of her mind. She was inside. She was hidden. She was safe. And outside her dark cocoon, the world smelled like cookies and sounded like home. She tucked her nose under her tail, her body relaxing into the dusty floor. The steady tick-tock of the clock became a lullaby. Under the couch, surrounded by the quiet sounds of the house and the watchful presence of the boy by the door, she closed her eyes. For the first time under a roof not made of sky or porch, she slept. Ever been caught in a storm so loud it feels like the sky is cracking apart? Where the world turns inside out, and the only thing that matters is finding solid ground. That's where our little gray soul found herself one wild October night, trapped between the terrifying fury outside and the unfamiliar warmth within. And sometimes, friend, it takes the whole world shaking to make you realize where you truly belong. The air had felt wrong all afternoon.
Thick. Heavy.
Charged, like the silence before a dropped plate shatters. The kitten had been curled on her blue blanket on the porch, drowsing in a patch of weak sun, lulled by the distant rumble of Leo's skateboard wheels on pavement. But the birds had stopped singing hours ago. The leaves hung utterly still, not a whisper of breeze. Even the usual city hum felt muffled, pressed down by the oppressive weight of the sky. She'd ventured inside earlier than usual, drawn by the promise of warmth and the lingering scent of Martha's beef stew. She'd claimed her now familiar spot under the living room couch, not hiding, exactly, but observing. The couch's dusty underbelly felt like a familiar cave, a safe vantage point. Grandpa snored softly in his armchair. Martha bustled in the kitchen, the clatter of pots a comforting rhythm. Leo sat on the rug near the coffee table, building something complicated with plastic blocks, occasionally murmuring to himself. Then the first sound, not thunder, a deep, groaning sigh that seemed to come from the earth itself. The house creaked in response, an old timber settling. The kitten lifted her head, ears swiveling. Silence, deeper than before. Then crack. Not a sound.
En explosion.
A blinding white light seared through the living room window, bleaching everything stark and colorless for a terrifying instant, followed instantly by a thunderclap so immense, so visceral. It wasn't heard, it was felt. It punched through the walls, shook the floorboards beneath the kitten's paws, vibrated in her teeth, hammered against her ribs like a physical blow. She shot out from under the couch like a gray bullet, a strangled yowl tearing from her throat.
Pure un thinking terror.
Sky falling. World ending. She ricocheted off the leg of an end table, scrambled wildly across the rug, claws snagging in the fibers, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs.
Boom.
Another detonation. Closer this time. The windows rattled violently in their frames. The lamp on the end table flickered. Rain erupted, not falling, but hurled against the house. A sudden, deafening roar, like 1,000 fists pounding the roof, the walls, the windows. Whoa! Leo yelled, scrambling to his feet, his block tower forgotten. Power's gonna go. Martha called from the kitchen, her voice tight. The kitten didn't hear words. She heard noise, chaos, terror. The safe, warm space had become a trap of shaking walls and blinding light and deafening fury. She needed out.
Now.
She streaked down the hallway, a blur of panic, heading for the only exit she knew, the blue door. But the rectangle of twilight she'd entered through was gone. Rain lashed against the glass panes, obscuring the outside world. The door was closed, trapped. She skidded to a halt on the linoleum, whirling, disoriented. Another lightning strike, this one directly overhead, lit the hallway in a strobing nightmare. The thunderclap was instantaneous, a physical slam that made her shriek and leap sideways, crashing into the wall.
Easy.
Easy, little one. Martha was there, crouching at the end of the hallway, her hands held out, palms open. But her face was pale in the flickering light. It's just a storm. You're safe. Safe? Safe? The house groaned again under another gust of wind. Rain hammered like bullets. The lights flickered wildly, plunging the hallway into near darkness before stuttering back on. Shadows leaped and danced like demons. The kitten didn't see kindness in Martha's gesture. She saw a looming shape in the chaotic gloom. She bolted past her, back into the living room, seeking any shelter, any corner. She scrambled behind the bookshelf, pressing herself into the narrow space between the heavy wood and the wall, trembling so violently her teeth chattered. Dust rained down on her as another thunderous boom shook the house. The lights flickered again, and went out. Darkness. Thick, complete, and terrifying. Only the intermittent, hellish flashes of lightning illuminated the room in frozen, jarring snapshots. Grandpa jolted awake in his chair, Leo frozen near the couch, Martha a silhouette in the doorway. The roar of the rain and wind was all-consuming, a monstrous beast trying to claw its way inside. Huddled in her dark crevice, plastered against the cold wall, the kitten squeezed her eyes shut. She couldn't outrun this. She couldn't hide deep enough. The storm was inside her bones, shaking her apart. The cozy smells of home were drowned by ozone and damp plaster and her own sharp fear scent. The world had cracked open, and she was falling through. Time lost meaning in the suffocating dark and noise. The kitten huddled behind the bookshelf, her world reduced to the cold plaster against her side, the gritty dust beneath her paws, and the relentless, terrifying symphony of the storm. Each lightning strike was a physical assault, a searing white knife slicing her eyes, followed by the crushing weight of thunder that vibrated through the floor, the wall, her very being. The rain drummed a frantic, mindless rhythm on the roof, a ceaseless roar that drowned out everything else. She heard human voices, distorted by the noise, calling to each other. Flashlights. Where are the flashlights, Martha? Grandpa, sounding breathless. Kitchen drawer. Leo, stay put.
I'm okay.
Is the kitten okay? Leo's voice, higher, strained with worry. The kitten didn't register the words, only the tones, sharp, urgent, adding to the chaos. Footsteps hurried past her hiding spot, beams of light slicing erratically through the gloom. A flashlight beam swept over the bookshelf, illuminating dust motes dancing wildly in its path. It paused near her crevice. She pressed herself flatter, becoming part of the shadow. She's behind the bookshelf. Leo called, his voice closer now, thick with concern. She's shaking so hard. The beam didn't linger. It moved away. She heard Leo's voice again, softer now, directed towards her hiding place, cutting through the storm's roar like a fragile thread. Hey, little one. It's okay. It's just noise. Loud, scary noise. But you're safe in here. The house is strong. We're all here with you. His voice was low, steady, not shouting over the storm, but weaving under it, a quiet counterpoint to the chaos. He was sitting on the floor, near the bookshelf, she realized. She could sense him there, a solid presence in the terrifying dark. Remember the porch? He murmured, his voice a soft vibration she could feel through the floorboards. Remember the rain then? Cold and wet. You're dry in here, dry and safe, even if it's loud. Another thunderclap, closer, shook the house. The kitten flinched violently, a tiny whimper escaping her. She heard Leo suck in a breath. I know, he whispered, his voice even softer, almost lost in the downpour's roar. It's scary, really scary. But listen to my voice.
Just my voice.
You know my voice, right? The bowl bringer, the blanket guy, the quiet sitter. He paused. The rain hammered. Wind howled around the eaves. "Remember the cheese?" he continued, his tone gentle, conversational, as if they weren't cowering in a dark house under siege. "You liked that cheese."
And the chicken?
"Always warm. Think about that warm chicken. Think about the blue blanket. How soft it was in the sun. Think about scratching the lattice under the porch. That was brave." He kept talking. Not about the storm. About her. About their shared history. About warm food and soft places and quiet moments. His voice was a lifeline, a tiny island of calm in the raging sea of noise. He described the sunbeam on the porch, the smell of the cookies, the soft thump of Grandpa's book closing. He painted pictures with words, pictures of safety and warmth, while the world outside screamed. Slowly, infinitesimally slowly, the frantic hammering of her heart began to ease. Not stop, but lessen. The tremors running through her body didn't vanish, but they became less violent spasms, more a constant, cold shiver. She focused on the sound of his voice, low and steady, a familiar anchor.
Lay.
Safe.
Dry. Warm.
The words weren't understood, but the feeling seeped in. She cracked open an eye. In the next lightning flash, she saw his silhouette sitting cross-legged on the carpet just a few feet from the bookshelf. He wasn't looking at her hiding spot. He was looking down at his hands, his head bowed slightly. His posture was relaxed, open. Not threatening. A still point in the chaos. The storm raged on. Rain lashed the windows like furious tears. Thunder continued its bombardment, though the strikes seemed slightly farther away now. The wind howled, a banshee wail that made the old house groan in protest. But Leo kept talking. About the sparrows on the fence. About the bumblebee in the geraniums. About the feel of the warm ceramic bowl under his hand when he placed it down for her. He talked until his voice grew hoarse. He talked while Martha and Grandpa moved quietly through the house, lighting candles whose flickering flames cast long, dancing shadows, but offered little real light. He talked while the power remained stubbornly off, plunging them back into near darkness between lightning flashes. The kitten stayed pressed against the wall, shivering, but she listened. She watched his shadow. The paralyzing terror receded, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion and a cold that seemed to seep from the floorboards into her very core. She was dry, yes, but the fear had chilled her more deeply than any rain. She was safe from the storm, but not from the fear it had carved inside her. She whimpered again, a soft, lost sound barely audible over the wind. Leo heard it. His murmuring stopped. In the dim, flickering light of a candle Martha placed on the coffee table, she saw him shift. He slowly, carefully, reached into his pocket. He pulled out something small and flat, his phone. He tapped the screen. A weak, bluish light bloomed. Not much, but in the oppressive darkness, it was a tiny beacon. He didn't point it at her. He set it on the floor near his knee, screen up, casting a small pool of light around him. It illuminated his sneakers, the edge of the rug, and the dust bunnies near the bookshelf. "See," he whispered, his voice rough. "Little light. Not scary light. Just light." He started humming then. Not the wandering tune from the sunny afternoon. Something lower. Softer. A deep, repetitive drone. Almost like the purr she couldn't muster. It was a sound without melody, just a steady, grounding vibration. A sound barrier against the storm's scream. The kitten watched the tiny pool of light. She listened to the low, resonant hum. The shivering didn't stop, but the icy knot of panic in her chest loosened. Just a fraction. She was cold. She was scared, but she wasn't alone in the roaring dark. Leo was there, humming, keeping a tiny light on, waiting. The storm's fury began to wane. The thunderclaps grew less frequent, rolling away into the distance like grumbling giants. The lightning strikes became sporadic flickers on the horizon, no longer bleaching the room. The rain settled from a pounding roar to a heavy, steady downpour, drumming a less frantic rhythm on the roof. The wind's hull dropped to a mournful sigh, but the damage was done. The house was still dark, lit only by the weak, flickering candle on the coffee table and the small, cold glow of Leo's phone. The air felt damp and charged, and the kitten, huddled behind the bookshelf, was a small, shivering monument to terror. The violent trembling had lessened to a constant, fine quiver, like a plucked wire. Her eyes, wide and glassy in the dim light, reflected the candle flame, but saw only the echoes of the sky's violence. She was utterly spent. Leo hadn't moved. He sat cross-legged on the carpet, his back against the couch, the phone's light casting shadows under his chin. He'd stopped humming, but his presence was a quiet hum itself. He watched her hiding spot, his expression etched with worry and helplessness. Martha appeared in the doorway, holding another candle. She surveyed the scene, the shivering lump of gray fur barely visible in the shadows behind the bookshelf, her son's tense vigil. Her face softened with understanding. "She's in shock, Leo," Martha said softly, kneeling beside him. The cold's gotten deep into her, and the fear's worse. She touched his shoulder. "We need to get her warm, really warm, and dry, even though she's indoors."
How?
Leo whispered, his voice cracking. "She's terrified. She'll bolt if we try to grab her." Martha thought for a moment, looking around the dim room. Her gaze landed on the pile of clean laundry she'd brought in earlier and left folded on the armchair. Fluffy towels, thick and soft. "Gently," she murmured, slowly, with something warm and soft. Like, she stood up, walked quietly to the armchair, and picked up the top towel. It was large, pale yellow, thick as a cloud. She held it loosely, letting it unfold slightly. It looked incredibly inviting. She walked back towards the bookshelf, moving with deliberate slowness. She didn't look directly at the kitten's hiding spot. She stopped several feet away near Leo. "Little one," Martha said, her voice a low, soothing murmur, barely audible over the rain. "You're so cold. We just want to help. Look what I have." She held the towel out slightly, letting the soft folds drape.
Soft. Warm.
Like your blanket on the porch, remember? But bigger. Warmer. The kitten watched the yellow shape through the gap between the bookshelf and the wall. It looked huge, unfamiliar. Her instincts screamed trap. But the memory of the blue blanket's softness was a powerful pull. The bone-deep chill made her crave warmth desperately. Martha slowly lowered herself to her knees. She kept the towel held loosely in front of her. She didn't move closer. She just waited. Leo held his breath. The candlelight flickered. The rain drummed. The kitten stared at the towel. She remembered the feel of the blue blanket beneath her paws, the warmth seeping into her pads, the safety it represented. This was bigger, offered by the woman whose voice was usually kind, even when she dropped colanders. A violent shiver racked her small body. She whimpered, a sound of pure misery and exhaustion. It was the sound that broke Leo. He moved, not towards her hiding spot. He crawled a few inches closer to his mother, then slowly, deliberately, lay down on his stomach on the carpet, parallel to the bookshelf, his head resting on his folded arms. He made himself small, non-threatening, a pathway, not a barrier. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice muffled by his arms but steady. "You can come out, just to the towel, just to get warm. We won't grab. Promise." The combination was potent, the promise of profound warmth. Martha's patient stillness, holding the soft haven. Leo's vulnerable posture, making himself harmless. The residual exhaustion and cold that had sapped her strength to flee. Slowly, trembling so hard she could barely control her movements, the kitten inched forward, not out of the crevice, but to the very edge of it. Her nose emerged, sniffing the air. The towel smelled clean, faintly of lavender soap, and overwhelmingly of softness. She looked at Martha's calm face, illuminated by the candle. She looked at Leo, prone on the floor, his eyes watching her, full of hope and worry. Another shiver, stronger this time, convulsed her. The cold was winning. With a tiny, gasping sound, she took one wobbly step out onto the carpet, then another. She kept her body low, ready to bolt back, but her eyes were fixed on the yellow towel draped over Martha's lap. Martha didn't move.
Didn't reach.
She just held the towel open, a soft yellow cave. "That's it, sweet pea," she breathed. "Come on, just a little closer.
Get warm.
The kitten took another step, and another. She was within a foot of the towel now. She could feel the faint warmth radiating from Martha's legs beneath it. The lavender smell was stronger. Safe. She hesitated, looked back at her dark crevice, looked at the towel. The cold bit deep. With the last of her courage, she took the final step. She didn't climb onto Martha's lap. She simply collapsed forward, pressing her shivering body against the soft, yielding folds of the towel where it pooled on the floor in front of Martha's knees. A sigh escaped Martha, soft as the rain outside. She didn't immediately wrap the towel around her. She just let the kitten press into it, feel its softness, absorb its residual warmth. "Oh, there you go," Martha whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Good girl. Just rest. Just get warm." The kitten buried her nose in the soft terry cloth. It was blissfully warm against her chilled fur. She felt Martha's hand then, not grabbing, not restraining, just resting gently, incredibly gently, on her trembling back. The touch was light, barely there, but it was contact. Warm, human contact. The kitten flinched instinctively, but didn't pull away. The warmth of the hand seeped through her fur, joining the warmth of the towel. It felt grounding, real, a tether to the present, away from the storm's lingering echoes. Leo slowly sat up, his eyes wide with awe.
He didn't speak.
He just watched, a tear tracking silently down his cheek in the candlelight. Martha kept her hand resting lightly on the kitten's back. With infinite slowness, she began to gather the edges of the huge towel. She didn't wrap it tightly. She gently folded it around the kitten, creating a soft, warm cocoon, leaving her head free. "Okay, little love," Martha murmured, her voice barely a breath. "Okay, we've got you." Then, with movements as smooth and careful as placing the blue bowl on the step, Martha slid her hands beneath the towel-wrapped bundle. She didn't lift roughly. She gathered. She cradled the trembling, towel-swaddled form against her chest, supporting its weight securely but gently. The kitten felt the world tilt. She was lifted, enclosed. The towel pressed warmly around her. She could feel the strong, steady beat of Martha's heart against her side, a deep, rhythmic thump-thump-thump that echoed the fading thunder. She could smell Martha's familiar scent, floral soap, coffee, warmth, mingled with the lavender towel. Panic tried to flare, thin and weak, trapped, held, but the warmth was overwhelming. The heartbeat was steadying. The arms holding her were firm but gentle, not crushing. And Leo was there, rising to his feet, his face alight with relief and wonder, walking beside his mother as she carried the bundled kitten towards the couch. "You're safe," Leo whispered, his voice trembling. "You're really safe now. We've got you." Martha sat down on the couch, settling the towel-wrapped bundle carefully on her lap. She kept one hand resting lightly on the lump that was the kitten's back, feeling the frantic tremors slowly begin to subside, replaced by the deep, involuntary shudders of a body warming up from the core. The kitten lay cocooned, her face just visible above the towel's edge. Her eyes, wide and exhausted, blinked slowly in the candlelight. She saw Leo kneel beside the couch, his face level with hers. He didn't touch her. He just smiled, a smile that held all the warmth of 100 sunbeams. "Hi," he whispered. She blinked again. The storm still raged outside, but inside the warm cocoon of the towel, held in the gentle arms that had picked her up, hearing the steady heartbeat and the boy's whispered greeting. The asterisk, ever watched a stray cloud finally find its patch of blue sky? That's what it looked like. One small, storm-shaken soul discovering what always feels like. No more cardboard boxes. No more watching from the cold. Just soft beds, gentle hands, and a name whispered like a promise. This is yours now. The storm's violence had faded, leaving behind a bruised purple dawn and a world washed clean, dripping softly. Inside the Blue Door house, the air hummed with a different kind of energy, quiet, watchful, warm. The kitten, still swaddled in the thick yellow towel like a burrito of fur and fragility, lay on Martha's lap. The frantic tremors had subsided into an exhausted stillness, punctuated only by the occasional deep, involuntary shudder as warmth slowly seeped back into her core. Leo knelt beside the couch, his face level with hers where it peeked out from the towel folds. He didn't touch her. He just watched, his eyes huge with a mixture of awe, relief, and lingering worry. The candle on the coffee table guttered, casting long, dancing shadows. "Power's back," Grandpa announced softly from the doorway, flipping a switch. Warm, electric light flooded the room, momentarily harsh after the long darkness. The kitten flinched, tucking her head deeper into the towel. "Sho, sweet pea, just the light," Martha murmured, her hand a constant, gentle weight on the towel-covered lump. "Good morning, Dad." "Good morning indeed," Grandpa rumbled, shuffling into the room. He looked down at the towel bundle, his expression softening. "Little fighter, isn't she? How's she doing?" "Cold, exhausted, but calmer," Martha said, stroking the towel lightly with her thumb. "We need to keep her warm, quiet." Leo finally spoke, his voice husky. Can she stay? Here? On the couch?" Martha met his gaze, then looked down at the small, shrouded form. The kitten's eyes, half-lidded with exhaustion, blinked slowly up at her. "For now, Leo. Right here." They moved with quiet purpose. Grandpa brought another soft throw blanket, draping it carefully over the towel cocoon. Martha shifted slightly, settling deeper into the couch cushions, making a nest of her lap. Leo fetched a shallow dish of lukewarm water, placing it silently on the coffee table within Martha's reach. The kitten watched it all through heavy-lidded eyes, too spent for fear, absorbing the soft voices, the gentle movements, the enveloping warmth. As the weak morning light strengthened, painting stripes across the carpet, Martha carefully began to unwrap the towel. Layer by layer, the soft terry cloth fell away. The kitten lay revealed, curled tightly on Martha's lap, her fur still slightly damp and ruffled in places, her body smaller and more vulnerable looking than ever without the shroud of terror. Leo gasped softly. "She's so little." Martha nodded, her fingers gently smoothing a clump of fur behind the kitten's ear. The touch was feather-light, but the kitten didn't flinch. She just sighed, a tiny puff of air, and pressed her head infinitesimally closer to Martha's soothing hand. "She needs a name," Leo whispered, his voice filled with reverence. Martha smiled. "She does. Any ideas?" Leo studied the small gray face, the dusting of white on her chest and paws, the distinctive jagged nick on her ear. He thought of alley shadows and porch steps, of lightning and lavender towels. "Mika," he said softly. It just came out, a small, bright sound, like a pebble dropped in still water. It means new moon in Japanese, or sometimes beautiful fragrance, but mostly it just sounds like her. "Mika," Martha repeated, testing the sound. It felt light, gentle, yet resilient on her tongue. She looked down at the kitten, who had opened her eyes fully now, watching Leo with a quiet, exhausted curiosity.
"Hello, me."
The kitten blinked. Her ears twitched just slightly. It wasn't recognition of the word, but a response to the gentle tone, the focused attention. Leo reached out, slower than slow, his finger trembling slightly. He didn't touch her fur. He gently brushed the very tip of his finger against the edge of the towel still beneath her. "Mika," he whispered again, pouring all the warmth, all the safety, all the belonging he felt into that single syllable. Mika watched his finger. Then, with a monumental effort that seemed to cost her dearly, she stretched her neck forward, ever so slightly. Her cold, damp nose touched the knuckle of Leo's outstretched finger. It was the lightest touch, fleeting, but it was deliberate, an acknowledgement, a tiny bridge built in the quiet morning light. "Mika," Leo breathed, his eyes shining. Martha's heart squeezed. I think she approves. Later, after a few sips of water offered drop by drop from Martha's finger, Mika slept. Truly slept. Not the tense doze of the alley or the exhausted collapse under the couch, but a deep, boneless sleep of utter depletion and burgeoning safety. Martha carefully transferred the sleeping bundle, towel and all, into a low cardboard box Leo had lined with another soft towel and the worn blue blanket from the porch. They placed it near the radiator in the living room, where gentle warmth radiated. Leo sat beside the box on the floor, watching the tiny rise and fall of Mika's flank beneath the blankets. He pulled out his sketch pad, not drawing Mika sleeping, that felt too intrusive. Instead, he drew the radiator, the window with its view of the rain-washed street, the corner of the blue blanket peeking from the box.
He drew her space.
Her first designated spot in this warm, dry, loud, wonderful, terrifying new world. Her bed, not under a cart, not behind a dumpster. A bed with her name whispered over it like a blessing. Mika. The days blurred into a soft, warm haze for Mika. The sharp edges of fear, honed by survival, were slowly being worn smooth by the relentless, gentle rhythm of the blue door house. Her world expanded cautiously from the radiator side box. She explored the living room rug, inch by careful inch, mapping its textures with her paws. The thick pile near the couch, the smoother weave under the coffee table. She investigated the legs of furniture, sniffing deeply at the sense of old wood, polish, and dust. The bookshelf, once a panic refuge, became a landmark. Leo was her constant shadow, moving with deliberate slowness, speaking in low, soothing tones. That's the bookshelf, Mika. Lots of stories in there. This is the couch, super soft for naps. He'd sit on the floor, reading aloud from his comic books, his voice a steady drone that became part of the house's comforting soundtrack. Martha moved with a calm efficiency that Mika learned to trust. She brought small dishes of food, warmed chicken, tuna flakes, tiny kibble pieces, placing them near Mika's box, then gradually moving them to a spot near the kitchen doorway as Mika grew braver. Mika learned the clatter of dishes meant food was coming, not danger. She learned the smell of coffee meant Martha was nearby, a quiet, reassuring presence. Grandpa was a source of deep, rumbling sounds, snoring in his chair, and unexpected, gentle offerings. He'd leave tiny crumbs of his toast crust near Mika's food dish. He talked to her in his gravelly voice about the weather or the crossword puzzle, never expecting a response, just filling the space with sound that felt companionable, not threatening. One afternoon, Leo sat cross-legged on the rug near Mika, who was cautiously investigating a patch of sunlight near the window. He had something small and fuzzy in his hand. "Look, Mika," he said softly, holding it out. It was a tiny mouse made of gray felt, with black bead eyes and a long, braided yarn tail. "For you." Mika froze, her gaze locked on the strange object. Prey? Her hunter's instincts flickered, warring with caution. It smelled of felt and dust and Leo's hands. Leo didn't thrust it at her. He placed it gently on the sun-warmed rug, about a foot away from her. Then he scooted back, giving her space. Mika watched it, unmoving, suspicious. Leo picked up a pencil. He started tapping it softly on the floorboard near the mouse. Tap, tap, tap. Mika's ears pricked forward. Her focus intensified. The tapping sound, it mimicked the skittering of tiny feet. Her tail gave an involuntary twitch. Tap, tap, tap. Slowly, cautiously, she crept forward. One paw, then another. Her nose stretched towards the felt mouse. She sniffed it. Definitely not real. But the tapping. Leo wiggled the pencil, making the mouse's yarn tail twitch slightly. That did it. Mika pounced. A silent, lightning-fast leap, landing with both front paws squarely on the felt mouse. She batted at it with her other paw, sending it skittering a few inches across the rug. She pounced again, pinning it, then rolled onto her side, clutching the mouse to her chest with her front paws, kicking at it fiercely with her hind legs. Gotcha.
Kill. Kill.
Leo stifled a laugh, watching her fierce, concentrated play. It was the first truly relaxed, joyful movement he'd seen from her inside the house. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't eating. She was playing. After a few minutes of mock disembowelment, Mika lost interest. She released the mouse, gave it a final, dismissive bat, and sat up, licking a paw as if nothing had happened. But her eyes were brighter, her posture looser. Leo left the mouse where it lay. Over the next few days, Mika rediscovered it often. Sometimes she'd ignore it. Sometimes she'd bat it half-heartedly across the rug. Sometimes, especially in the late afternoon when the sun slanted low, she'd attack it with the same ferocious glee as that first time. The felt mouse became her prey,
Her toy.
the sunbeam became her other great discovery. She learned its path across the living room floor. In the morning, it was a narrow stripe near the radiator. By midday, it widened into a golden pool near the coffee table. In the late afternoon, it stretched long and inviting across the rug towards the bookshelf. Mika claimed it. She'd follow its progress, settling into the warmest spot with a sigh of deep contentment. She'd sprawl on her side, belly exposed, legs stretched out, soaking in the heat like a tiny solar panel. Her fur, clean now and fluffier thanks to Martha's careful brushing with a soft bristled comb, glowed golden in the light. One sunny afternoon, Leo found her like this, a puddle of gray fur in the heart of the sunbeam, utterly relaxed. He sat down quietly nearby, sketching. He drew the way her whiskers fanned out, relaxed. The curve of her exposed belly, the utter peace in her posture. Mika opened one eye, a slit of green in the golden fur. She saw Leo sitting there, absorbed in his drawing. She didn't tense, didn't retreat. She just watched him for a moment through half-closed eyes, then let her head flop back down onto the warm rug with a soft thump. Leo looked up from his sketch, a slow smile spreading across his face. She wasn't just in the sunbeam. She was of it, a creature made of light and warmth and quiet safety. He picked up a colored pencil, a warm, buttery yellow, and carefully shaded the sunbeam around her sleeping form. Mika's spot, he wrote lightly in the corner of the page. Later, Martha came in, holding a small cardboard box. "Mail came," she said softly, seeing Mika asleep. "Something for our little resident." Leo looked up. Martha opened the box and pulled out a small, soft bed. It wasn't fancy. A simple plush oval in a soft gray blue, like twilight. But it looked incredibly soft and inviting. "Thought we could put it right here," Martha whispered, pointing to Mika's favorite corner of the sunbeam's path. A proper bed, for a proper house cat. They placed the new bed carefully on the rug. Martha fluffed it up. It looked like a tiny cloud. Mika woke later, stretching languidly. She blinked, disoriented for a second by the new object in her territory. She approached cautiously, sniffing the plush fabric. It smelled new, faintly chemical, but also soft, undeniably soft. She looked at her old cardboard box near the radiator. She looked at the inviting plush cloud in her sunbeam. With a decisive little hop, she stepped into the new bed. She circled once, twice, kneading the plush fabric with her claws, a low, rumbling sound starting deep in her chest. P-R-R-R-T, P-R-R-R-T. Then she settled down, curling into a tight, contented ball, her nose tucked under her tail. The sunbeam warmed the plush bed, and the plush bed cradled her. Leo and Martha watched from the doorway. Martha slipped her arm around Leo's shoulders. "Looks like she approves," Martha whispered. Leo just nodded, his heart too full for words. Mika had a toy. She had a sunbeam. And now, nestled in plush twilight blue, she had a bed. Her own bed, in her own home. Trust, Mika was learning, wasn't a single leap. It was 1,000 tiny steps, like putting weight on a newly healed paw, testing the ground cautiously before committing fully. She learned the rhythm of the house, the clatter of breakfast dishes, the rumble of Grandpa's newspaper, the quiet concentration of Leo doing homework at the kitchen table, the soft murmur of the radio Martha kept on in the afternoons. She learned that the vacuum cleaner was loud and terrifying, but it always went away and Martha always apologized afterward with extra chin scratches. She learned that the doorbell meant strangers, and strangers meant retreating to her plush bed under the bookshelf until the voices left. She learned Leo's touch. It started with him sitting near her while she ate, his hand resting palm up on the floor nearby. She'd finish her meal, lick her paws, and then, sometimes, stretch her neck to sniff his fingers. Then, one day, she nudged his knuckles with the top of her head. Just a quick bump. Leo froze, his breath catching. He didn't move his hand. Mika nudged again, a little more firmly. Scratch? Slowly, agonizingly slowly. Leo lifted one finger. He gently, so gently, scratched the spot between her ears where her fur was softest. Mika closed her eyes. She leaned into the touch, ever so slightly. It became a ritual. After meals, in her sunbeam, sometimes even when she was curled in her plush bed, Leo would sit nearby, hand offered. Mika would approach, sometimes immediately, sometimes after a moment's consideration, and bump his hand. Leo would scratch, base of the ears, under the chin, along the jawline where her fur met the softer fur of her throat. Martha's touch was different. Softer, broader. Gentle strokes along her back, careful brushes while combing out a tangle. Grandpa's touch was rarer, usually just a gentle fingertip offered for her to sniff when he walked by, or a soft stroke along her flank if she was sleeping deeply in her bed. But the deepest trust was still unspoken, held in the quiet space between wakefulness and sleep. Mika still startled easily at loud noises. She still watched doors warily. She still retreated to her bed if too much happened at once. The storm had left echoes. One chilly afternoon, a week after the new bed arrived, Mika was curled tightly in her plush haven. A damp, blustery wind rattled the windows, a distant cousin to the storm's fury, but enough to make the house creak and groan. Mika's ears twitched with each gust, her eyes opening to slits, scanning the room. Leo was on the rug nearby, lying on his stomach, reading a thick book. He sensed her tension. He didn't look up immediately. He just started humming. That same low, resonant hum he'd used during the storm.
Deep. Steady.
A sound barrier against the wind's moan. Mika watched him. His eyes were on his book, his body relaxed. The hum vibrated softly in the quiet room, weaving under the sound of the wind. Slowly, Mika's tense muscles began to unclench. Her eyelids grew heavier. She tucked her nose deeper under her tail, seeking her own warmth. Leo's hum was a thread connecting her to safety, pulling her away from the edge of unease. She drifted. The wind became background noise. The creaks of the house faded. The only constants were the soft pressure of her plush bed and the deep, resonant vibrating through the floorboards. Leo turned a page. He kept humming, the sound unchanging, a river of calm. He saw Mika's breathing deepen, saw the last tension leave her shoulders. She was asleep, truly asleep. He kept humming, softer now, almost unconsciously. He watched the gentle rise and fall of her side, watched the way her whiskers relaxed completely, fanning out over the plush fabric, watched the utter peace on her small face. Then he heard it, or rather, he felt it first. A faint vibration, almost imperceptible, humming through the floorboards beneath him. It wasn't his own hum. It was deeper, softer, coming from Mika's bed. He stopped humming, holding his breath. He tilted his head, listening intently. There it was, a sound so soft it was almost more sensation than noise. A deep, rhythmic rumble. A purr, not the tiny, hesitant rumble she'd made against his knuckles on the rainy porch step. Not the brief burst while playing with the felt mouse. This was a deep, rolling, continuous purr. The purr of utter contentment. The purr of a creature so profoundly relaxed, so completely safe, that its body sang with it. Leo's eyes welled up. He didn't move. He barely breathed. He just listened, a slow, incredulous smile spreading across his face, warming him more deeply than any radiator. Purr, purr, It flowed through the quiet room, weaving with the sound of the wind outside, which suddenly seemed less threatening. It was the sound of a knot untying deep inside her, the sound of fear melting away, replaced by a warmth that came from within, the sound of a stray cloud finally, irrevocably, finding its patch of blue sky.
Mika slept on, all yours.
Her body did the speaking for her, in the softness of her own bed, in the warmth of her own home. With the boy who had shown up every single day humming nearby, her small engine of contentment ran smoothly, steadily. Purr, purr. Leo carefully, silently, closed his book. He didn't get up. He lay there on the rug, his head resting on his arms, a few feet from Mika's bed, just listening to the most beautiful sound in the world. The sound of Mika, not just being safe, but being happy, being home. He didn't know how long he lay there. The wind died down. The late afternoon sun slanted through the window, painting Mika's gray fur with gold and making the plush bed glow. Her purr continued, a steady, comforting thrum in the quiet house, a silent song of belonging that filled every corner. Leo felt his own eyes grow heavy, lulled by the deep, peaceful rhythm. When Martha came in later to call him for dinner, she found them both asleep. Leo, sprawled on the rug, a peaceful smile on his face. Mika, a purring puddle of fur in her twilight blue bed. The air hummed with warmth and the quiet, profound music of a soul that no longer had to wait by the window. Martha smiled, her own eyes suspiciously bright. She tiptoed out, leaving the door slightly ajar, the sound of Mika's purr a gentle beacon in the gathering dusk. Purr, purr, the song of home. Funny thing about windows, they work both ways. For months, she'd watched the world from the cold side, pressing her nose to the glass. Now, curled on the warm sill with her boy's heartbeat steady against her back, she finally understood. The best views aren't the ones you long for, they're the ones you get to share. Winter arrived softly, frosting the windows overnight with delicate lace patterns. Mika woke in her plush bed to a world transformed. The familiar street outside the Blue Door house dusted white, the bare branches of the oak tree glazed with ice that caught the morning sun and shattered it into 1,000 glittering pieces. She stretched, her claws flexing into the soft fabric, her back arching in a slow, luxurious curve. The radiator beneath the window hissed companionably, pumping warmth into the room. The smells of coffee and cinnamon toast drifted from the kitchen, mingling with the faint, clean scent of snow that seeped through the window seams. Mika yawned, her pink tongue curling, then hopped lightly from her bed. She padded across the rug, no longer creeping, no longer low-bellied, her tail held high in a confident, graceful arc. She leaped onto the windowsill with practiced ease, settling onto the folded towel Martha had placed there just for her. The view was different today. Familiar shapes softened by snow. The bakery awning wore a thick white cap. Mrs. Gable's flower cart, now stored for winter under a tarp, was a humped ghost across the street. Footprints dotted the sidewalk. Leo's deep sneaker tracks from his early morning paper route, the delicate bird track hieroglyphics of sparrows, the occasional paw print of a neighborhood dog. Mika pressed her nose to the cold glass, watching her breath fog a small circle. This was the same window she'd peered through months ago from the outside, her paws leaving tiny, desperate smudges on the rain-washed pane. The same window where she'd watched Leo and his family move through their warm, bright lives while she shivered in the dark. But everything was different now. The cold didn't bite her paws. The wind couldn't ruffle her fur. The scents of food weren't taunting ghosts. They were promises, soon to be fulfilled in her own ceramic bowl with the little fish design. A movement caught her eye. Leo trudged up the snowy sidewalk, his red scarf bright against the white, his arms full of newspapers. He stopped halfway, crouching to examine something in the snow, probably those sparrow tracks, Mika thought with the proprietary knowledge of someone who'd watched this boy's curiosity for months. She didn't yowl at the window, didn't scratch the glass. She knew the routine now. Leo would come in, stomping snow from his boots in the entryway. He'd hang his coat, the wet wool smell mingling with the cinnamon toast. He'd wash his hands at the kitchen sink, the pipes groaning in the walls. And then, right on cue, the front door opened. Cold air rushed in, carrying the crisp, mineral scent of snow. Mika's ears swiveled towards the sound, but she didn't leave her perch. "Björr, it's a freezer out there." Leo's voice, bright with cold and youth. "Boots off on the mat, kiddo," Martha called from the kitchen. "And those gloves go on the radiator, not the floor." Mika listened to the familiar symphony, the thump of boots being towed off, the rustle of a scarf unwinding, the metallic clink of the radiator cover being lifted to dry gloves. Then footsteps coming closer. Leo appeared in the living room doorway, his cheeks pink with cold, his dark hair dusted with melting snowflakes. He saw Mika on the windowsill and grinned. "There's my window cat," he said, crossing to her. He didn't scoop her up. He knew she disliked being grabbed, but he did lean down, pressing his cold nose briefly to the top of her head in a gesture that had become their private greeting. Mika blinked up at him, her slow blink of trust, then returned her gaze to the window. Leo straightened, looking out at the snowy street. "Pretty, huh? First real snow." He pointed. "Mrs. Gable's cat, Mr. Puddles, left those tracks by the bakery. And see those little dots? Sparrows at the feeder. And that mess over there." Mika followed his pointing finger, her tail twitching with interest. She knew these sights, these smells, these sounds. But seeing them with Leo from the warm side of the glass, with his voice painting stories over the familiar view, that was new. That was shared. She leaned slightly against his arm where it rested on the sill beside her. Not asking for pets, just touching, just being close. Leo fell silent, looking down at the small gray cat pressed against his sleeve. His throat tightened. He remembered those first days, her flinching at every movement, her hiding under furniture, her desperate, feral alertness. Now here she was, choosing to lean into him, watching the world with calm curiosity rather than fearful longing. Outside, a gust of wind sent a shower of snow crystals swirling from the oak branches, sparkling like diamond dust in the morning light. Mika's pupils dilated, her ears pricking forward. Not in fear, in fascination. Leo smiled. "Yeah," he murmured, "it's pretty amazing." And for the first time, looking out at the snow globe world through Mika's eyes, he really saw it. Winter deepened, and with it came routines woven into the fabric of daily life at the Blue Door house. Mika no longer had a designated safe space. The entire house was hers. She napped in Martha's knitting basket when the yarn was softest, batted at Grandpa's crossword pencil when she felt mischievous, and claimed Leo's pillow every night with regal certainty. But their favorite ritual unfolded in the evenings, after homework was done and dinner dishes cleared. Leo would settle on the living room rug with his sketchbook, and Mika would curl nearby, sometimes in her plush bed, sometimes on the couch cushion beside him, occasionally right on the corner of his sketchpad, a living paperweight. Tonight, she chose his lap. It wasn't planned. One moment Leo was cross-legged on the rug, sketching the snow-laden oak branches outside the window. The next, Mika had stretched luxuriously, sauntered over, and climbed directly onto his thighs, circling twice before settling into a compact loaf shape. Leo froze, his pencil hovering mid-stroke. Mika had sat near him before, had even leaned against him at the window. But this was new. This was lap. This was trust made tangible. He exhaled slowly, not wanting to disturb her. "Hey there," he whispered. Mika blinked up at him, her golden green eyes reflecting the lamplight. Then she tucked her nose under her tail and closed her eyes, her purse starting up like a tiny, contented motor. Yarrrrrrrr. Leo waited a beat, then carefully rested his sketchbook against her back. She didn't startle, didn't tense, just kept purring, her warmth seeping through his jeans. He began to draw again, his strokes light to avoid jostling her. Not the oak tree anymore. Now he sketched the curve of Mika's ear, the delicate whorls of fur inside, the jagged nick at the tip that told her story of survival. He drew the way her whiskers fanned across his knee, The perfect comma of her tail curled around her paws. Martha paused in the doorway, a basket of laundry in her arms. She took in the scene. Leo bent over his sketchbook, Mika a gray puddle on his lap, and smiled. "Well," she murmured, "look at that." Leo glanced up, his face glowing with quiet triumph. "She just climbed up. I see that." Martha set the laundry basket down and reached for her phone, snapping a quick photo. First lap sits. Historic moment. Mika opened one eye at the click of the camera, then closed it again, unbothered. Her purr deepened. Grandpa appeared behind Martha, peering over her shoulder. "Ha, about time," he rumbled. "That cat's been yours since the storm, Leo. She's just now making it official." Leo looked down at Mika, at the way her body rose and fell with each breath, at the absolute trust in her relaxed posture. His chest felt strangely tight. Martha and Grandpa retreated, leaving them in their bubble of lamplight and quiet. The house settled around them. The tick of the clock, the occasional hiss of the radiator, the distant clatter of Martha loading the dishwasher. Leo kept sketching, his pencil moving lightly. He drew the way Mika's front paws were tucked neatly under her chest, the way one single toe bean peeked out from her fur, the way her ear twitched occasionally, tracking distant sounds without concern. After a while, Mika stretched, her claws flexing gently against his thighs. Not painfully. She'd learned about claw control during their play sessions. She rolled slightly onto her side, exposing her belly, not all the way, just a partial surrender, a hint of vulnerability. Leo held his breath. Then, moving with infinite care, he lowered his pencil and touched his fingertips to the soft fur just under her chin. Mika's purr hitched for a second, then resumed, louder. She pushed her head up slightly into his touch.
More.
Leo scratched gently, marveling at the softness, at the trust. "You are home," he whispered, the words coming unbidden. "You know that, right? This is your home." Mika didn't understand the words, of course, but the tone, the warmth, the certainty, seeped into her bones, as real and tangible as the radiator's heat. She kneaded his legs lightly, her purr vibrating through both of them. Outside, snow began to fall again, big, lazy flakes drifting past the window. Inside, the boy and the cat stayed like that for a long time. Leo sketching with one hand while the other stroked Mika's fur, Mika dozing in the circle of his lap, their rhythm syncing, their warmth shared. Later, when the sketch was done, a perfect, loving rendering of Mika in her favorite sleeping pose, Leo would tuck it into the growing album of Mika's firsts. First time on the blanket, first toy mouse attack, first purr, and now first lap sits. But in that moment, there was just this, the snow, the silence, and the profound simplicity of a boy and his cat, together. The deepest part of winter brought with it the longest nights, the kind that started early and lingered late, wrapping the Blue Door house in a hush so complete it felt like the world had narrowed to just these rooms, these people, this warmth. Mika had grown into her place among them with quiet certainty. She greeted Martha at the coffee machine each morning, twining around her ankles until the first scoop of wet food hit her bowl. She supervised Grandpa's crossword puzzles from the arm of his chair, occasionally batting at his pen when he took too long on a clue. And every night, without fail, she claimed her spot on Leo's bed, sometimes curled at his feet, sometimes sprawled across his pillow like a furry hat, but increasingly pressed against his side, her back to his ribs, her purr a quiet lullaby. Tonight was one of those nights. A storm raged outside, not the violent, terrifying storm of her arrival, but a steady, snow-laden gale that moaned around the eaves and piled drifts against the front door. The wind rattled the windows in their frames, but the sound was muted, distant, a reminder of the cold kept firmly at bay. Leo's room was a cocoon of warmth. The nightlight cast a soft blue glow over the cluttered surfaces, the model rockets on the shelf, the sketchbooks piled on the desk, the socks that never quite made it to the hamper. The radiator clanked softly, pumping heat into the small space. Mika lay stretched along Leo's side, her body a warm line from his shoulder to his hip. She wasn't sleeping yet. Her ears twitched occasionally, tracking the storm sounds, but her breathing was slow and even. Her muscles relaxed. Leo read aloud from his book, his voice a quiet rumble beneath her. He wasn't reading to her exactly, just enjoying the words, the sound of them in the quiet room. But Mika had grown to love the rhythm of his voice, the way it vibrated through his chest under her cheek. And the stars, Leo read, burned with a cold, steady light, untouched by the winds that raged below. Mika's eyes drifted closed. The storm, Leo's voice, the warmth of the bed, they wove together into a tapestry of safety so complete it almost hurt. She dreamed sometimes of her old life, the cardboard box behind the bakery, the endless gnaw of hunger, the desperate loneliness. But waking from those dreams to find herself here, in this warm room, with this boy's steady breath beside her, made the present all the sweeter. Leo marked his page with a finger and looked down at the small gray cat pressed against him. In the blue glow of the nightlight, her fur looked almost silver, her stripes subtle shadows. Her whiskers twitched slightly, dreaming probably of mouse chases or sunbeams or maybe, just maybe, of nothing at all. Just peaceful darkness. He carefully set the book aside and shifted onto his side, facing her. Mika stirred slightly, blinking up at him with sleepy, half-lidded eyes. "Hey," Leo whispered. "You okay?" Mika stretched one paw out, resting it lightly on his arm. Not holding, just touching, just there. Then she tucked her nose under her tail again, her eyes closing. Leo smiled. He reached over and turned off the lamp, plunging the room into near darkness save for the nightlight's soft glow. The wind howled outside, but here, under the blankets, with Mika's warmth against him, the world felt perfect. He drifted off to the sound of Mika's purr and the storm's distant fury, the two rhythms intertwining, one small and warm and alive, the other vast and wild and impersonal. Sometime in the deepest part of the night, the storm passed. The wind died. The snow stopped. Silence settled over the neighborhood, thick and muffling. Mika woke briefly, lifting her head. The room was quiet now, the only sounds Leo's steady breathing and the occasional creak of the house settling. Through the window, she could see the clouds parting, revealing a slice of starry sky. She stretched, careful not to disturb Leo, and resettled, curling into a tighter ball against his side. Her last thought before sleep took her again was of the window, not as a barrier anymore, not as something separating her from warmth and light, but simply as glass. Just glass. And beyond it, a world she could watch with interest but no longer longing. For the first time in her life, Mika didn't dream of cardboard boxes or cold alleys or empty bellies. She dreamed of sunbeams and warm hands and the deep, abiding certainty that when morning came, the bowl would be full, the bed would be warm, and the boy would be there. And he was.